Out there, what are the headlines? It is a traditional Labour tax and spend budget.
People voted for Labour because they wanted roads that aren't full of potholes. They want police on our streets and they want an NHS that is there when they need it. And we're delivering that.
The bad news is that the Chancellor is now dragging millions of people into higher rates of tax for the next 3 long years. And through pensions, there is another hike in national insurance. The good news is the extra help for the poorest families and everybody struggling with energy bills. There's more money for health, defence and education. Help for high streets paid for by the online giants. Rachel Reeves remains, it seems, deeply committed to capital investment. She wants more, faster nuclear power and AI. She's offering more help to growing companies, more for local mayors. There is a lot to like in the detail. The Chancellor at least had the right words on the knotty problem of the bloating welfare costs.
Under the Conservatives, the cost of our welfare system increased by nearly 1 percentage point of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion in just 5 years. The broken welfare system that we inherited wrote off millions of people as too sick to work. And we will reform that system so that it is a system that does not count the cost of failure, but one that protects people who cannot work and empowers those who can.
On tax, there was no attempt to dodge the nasty reality that frozen thresholds are another tax on working people, something that Labour is supposed to be against.
I know that maintaining these thresholds is a decision that will affect working people. I said that last year, and I won't pretend otherwise now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most.
And indeed, the so-called mansion tax does go ahead. There are big questions about that, while better-off pensioners and online gamblers will pay more as well. But I called this a Labour budget, and the Chancellor's announcement on the 2-child benefit cap was, in essence, what I meant by that.
And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from April.
Overall, slightly to my own surprise, I rather liked a lot of this budget, tilting towards fairness and keeping the markets calm in very hard times. On the politics, in the longer term, there is a real problem here for Labour MPs as the income tax rises arrive in 2 to 3 years, just in time for voters to notice before the next election. But frankly, neither Rachel Reeves nor Keir Starmer are that bothered at the moment about the long term. The Prime Minister is wondering whether his own MPs are going to try to get rid of him within weeks or months at the most. And this budget will have calmed them down a bit. Then there's where we started, that huge leak and the lack of central government grip. Well, that is a shocker. The actual budget was the still calm centre at the heart of rising political turmoil. Not bad for Britain, but not good for the Prime Minister. I watched it all with Andy Haldane, the former chief economist at the Bank of England. You heard him quoted by the Leader of the Opposition a few moments ago. And here's our discussion immediately after Rachel Reeves sat down. Andy, I didn't know there was such a thing as synchronised jaw-dropping, but we were sitting here together in the studio watching the pre-budget coverage when suddenly the fact that virtually the entire budget had been leaked ahead of time emerged.
Well, we had been discussing how leaky this process had been before we got the leak to end all leaks.
Exactly.
Which is the whole shebang.
Was there? Before
the Chancellor had even taken the stage. I mean, there cannot have been a more dramatic run-up to a budget ever, Andrew, than that one, I think.
Well, I think we both remember at least the story of Hugh Dalton stopping and leaking, just a phrase from one aspect of one budget very briefly to one journalist who published it a little bit early, and he had to resign as Chancellor at the time. And we all thought perhaps that the Chancellor is going to have to go herself.
As it turned out, it looks to be on the LBR rather than on the Treasury.
And she made that very clear, didn't she?
The Chancellor was very clear about that early on. The word "there" was used with intonation in the first 30 seconds.
She sounded properly angry, I thought.
And rightly so. This is totally beyond the pale. You saw the gyrations in financial markets. That's real money being won and lost. This is market manipulation.
So there'll be people out there who are a lot richer and people out there who are a lot poorer because of that leak.
Quite so. And there will have to be, I think, some pretty drains-up inquiry about what has gone wrong, because this is not the way to carry out any policy process.
I don't wish anybody ill, but I suspect by the end of play today we may see a resignation around this.
I fear as much. It looks like a technical error. They can happen, but ultimately there should be some accountability for something that's been that damaging, not just to financial markets, but to the credibility of the whole process, Andrew.
Let's turn to the budget itself then, Andy, which is the sort of still small voice at the centre of all of this political mayhem, and actually a relatively good budget in many ways. I think the markets in the end quite liked it.
Yeah, we've had the gyration, but where markets appear to have landed for the moment is as you were. They've taken it in their stride. They were one of the stakeholders. The other were the backbenchers. They seem to like it, certainly the lifting the two-child cap. So in terms of the key stakeholders and some of the measures, I would say, again, a bad hand played today pretty adroitly by the Chancellor.
We should just also point out that just before she stood up, she was sitting there on the front bench. Somebody passed her a phone which said, "Your entire budget has just been leaked, Chancellor." And you could see her face fall. An absolute nightmare for her to get up and then deliver a budget with a certain amount of gusto and energy and self-confidence was in itself impressive, I thought.
I agree with that. And I think the Chancellor warmed into the budget speech as well. Not surprised when you're shocked from it like that. Imagine the signature moment of your year. Yeah. Perhaps of your career, and you're told the contents are appearing on the screen before you've spoken. I mean, I thought she lent into that very well in the circumstances.
Broadly speaking, she's raising about twice as much more in tax as she's spending.
That's right.
In extra spending.
That's right. And that's the positive way of putting that, is that she's created for herself some extra wiggle room, some extra headroom, which financial markets in particular we're very keen on, so that we're not back to this pantomime again 12 months from now, Andrew.
And that means, I mean, I think the figure that she keeps quoting is for every sort of £10 we spend, £1 goes to pay for interest on money borrowed by the government. That should, if this works, start to come down a bit.
It should. I mean, the plan is to have moved from a financial deficit. Let's bear in mind, the UK's run a financial deficit every year of this century. Right? But that into surplus towards the end of this Parliament.
She says.
If the plans are stuck to, and debt falling every year of the budget forecast. And that's perhaps why financial markets have viewed this with constructive scepticism, but nonetheless are taking it at a word at the moment.
A certain background mistrust, because they have to believe that really year in, year out, she's going to get a grip of welfare, get a grip of government spending in a way that previous governments have rather, by and large, failed to do.
And this one has so far, 16, 17 months in. So I think the key things to watch for that financial markets are watching like a hawk. One would be, of that balance between an extra 26 billion in taxes and extra 12 billion in spend, the spending comes up front. And the tax rises come towards the end of a parliament. Can a government approaching an election increase taxes of that magnitude? And indeed, will the measures that were mentioned today actually yield the tax returns that are expected? Those are big open questions. Let's take the mansion tax. I mean, to be honest, who knows what that might yield? Who knows whether that will even be possible to design in a credible way?
Well, you walk around any sort of old city centre and you'll see brick buildings with the windows bricked up even now. And that's because in the 18th century there was a window tax. So people responded by bricking up their windows. In the same way, people hovering on the edge of those extra payments at the higher end of the market are going to find all sorts of ways to diminish their property's value.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a feature of this government so far that even policy measures that sound very sound and sensible in principle, like let's remove winter fuel payments for millionaire pensioners. The fault has come in the design when pensions on 13 grand are getting their winter fuel. So it's all in the design. I think some big design questions about the mansion tax and one or two other aspects of the package.
Let me ask you about a couple of those, because the biggest headline tax raise is, of course, the threshold freeze for another 3 years, longer, I think, than anyone was expecting.
Yes.
And that is going to feel like a higher tax for working people right across the board, something the Chancellor of the government had said they weren't going to do.
Yes. I mean, I think the language the government was using this year and last year was, will this be felt in the pay slips of working people? Yes, this will be felt.
Absolutely it will,
in
yes.
the pay slips of working people right across the income spectrum. So yes, that is for real, and that's the biggest single source of that extra 26 billion in tax.
Another big one is the salary sacrifice scheme for pensions. Can you just explain to people listening how that works and how they're going to be affected by that? Because it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think to everyone's surprise, certainly to mine, that is purported to raise an extra £5 billion. And that's effectively those that were putting money towards pensions were getting a national insurance dispensation on that. And that is now being capped in a way that we felt both by the saver, the worker, and through the business who will pay extra. The larger share will actually be paid by. So actually,
it's another business tax, really.
It's another national insurance increase for businesses. And indeed, there are a smattering of other measures that will be felt by businesses as well. So businesses copped for most of the tax rises in the previous budget. It's copping for less of them this time, more on households, but still for some.
Yes, I don't want to intrude on private grief. I saw you wincing, but you were quoted in the chamber by the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, talking about the fandango of the previous budget having a really bad effect on growth and employment in the British economy. Yeah. Do you think that we're going to see the same deleterious or negative effect this time round on business and on growth and on employment?
Well, I hope not, and I think not, actually. So the very fact that, this headroom has now been more than doubled means that the speculation about what further tax rises might be needed has, I hope, largely dissipated. So that drag, that pre-budget drag, ought to be removed. It's also the case that some of the measures announced today to cut the cost of living, and the Chancellor was talking about a cut in the inflation rate of almost 0.5% next year, will make it, as well as being good news.
That and energy bills.
That, energy and rail. Were the three biggies. That will cut the cost of living for a great many people. It will also, Andrew, make it easier for the Bank of England, my former employers, to cut interest rates. So cutting cost of living, cut in cost of borrowing, reduction of the damaging speculation, I think that could provide a bit of a tailwind to growth as we move into next year. And I think it's among the reasons why financial markets have taken this as a mild positive.
So this is really interesting. We have been through an absolute whirlwind economically of a year. Really, really bad politics as well, by the way, and that carries on. But do you think that this budget, despite the extraordinary leaking of it and the kind of horlicks around it, perhaps there's a tiny little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel now?
Well, I think going into this, there was a healthy degree of pessimism about how the tax measures that seem very likely would shape the future growth outlook. I think emerging from it is a more positive picture. I don't think this is transformational for the UK's growth prospects, but at the moment you probably take a no-score draw. When the possibility was a defeat for growth.
Much worse than that. And the Chancellor herself, she is, by some accounts, the least popular member of the Cabinet. She's had a very, very torrid time. We saw her in tears in the chamber. Do you think this performance today secures her future for a while?
I don't know the answer to that question, in truth, Andrew. I thought today, in the circumstances, given the backdrop, the Chancellor's performance was a good one. Ultimately, though, the backdrop is still of a pretty doomy, gloomy growth picture. And a lot of the tough choices, when those tax rises start hitting people's bank accounts,
they'll really feel them.
The effects will be felt. And that's where I think both the backbenchers and the wider public will reach their verdict.
So in terms of the year ahead, everything depends upon whether we start to see finally a little bit of real growth.
I think so. I mean, in some ways, that has been the arbiter of success throughout the course of this.
Which is why there hasn't been much success.
No, quite so. There's a chance now that the budget is behind us. Not quite tabula rasa, but a chance into the new year to build a different narrative about the UK's prospects than has been the case with the sort of Damocles from the budget hanging over businesses and households for the greater part of the second half of this year. The first half of this year was a story of cautious optimism. The second half was a story of caution. There's a chance we could recapture that glimmer of optimism into the first half of next.
And I have stuck my neck out and said that actually having the budget itself, with all the rigmarole around it and all the tradition, all the build-up and all the leaks and all the arguments, has itself been a brake on economic growth. It's frozen business investment. It's persuaded people not to hire. And actually, I begin to think we should get rid of the budget as we have known it.
Well, listen, if there's one positive from the maelstrom, the chaos, what I call the fandango around this process, it is, I hope it does lead to a reappraisal, a re-engineering of this process, which works for no one right now, least of all for those that spend in the economy, businesses and households. It needs to be something that is, if not leak-proof, then at least much more watertight than is the case right now. And also not so long. You can't go through 6 months of stasis if you want to grow our economy.
A calm sort of laying out of the national accounts without drama and occasional rises in taxes done by legislation would be better than this.
It'd be better for everyone. I think better for our politics and certainly better for our economics if that budgetary process could be thought about. And by the way, this is back to the future. This is as budgets were in the old days. And also, we don't need a thin sprinkling of 150 measures.
Don't.
In the days of yore, it was 2 or 3 big things. Let's stick to doing 2 or 3 big things well and at scale. That's the way to growth.
Wise words, Andy Haldane. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Andrew.
And I would love to hear your thoughts as well before 7 p.m. So please do text in with your reaction to the budget on 84850 or email mar@lbc.co.uk. Right, let's get into the politics of today's budget a little bit more. To begin with James Murray, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Labour MP for Ealing North. And in a moment, Sir Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. Welcome to you both. James, at the time of the election, you and your party said that you would not raise taxes on working people. Freezing the thresholds clearly breaks that promise, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. We stuck to our manifesto.
I'm sorry, it means more taxes.
Let me tell you exactly what our manifesto says, which is that we will keep taxes on working people as low as possible. And if you look at what Rachel set out today in her budget that she delivered in the House of Commons, she set out how we're asking everyone to make a contribution. We're being very upfront about that, but we're keeping that contribution on working people as low as possible thanks to the other tax decisions that we're taking.
But a year ago, the Chancellor said that freezing thresholds would mean raising taxes on working people, which is what the government was not going to do. She has broken that.
No, she took it head on in the budget today. She said that the decision around extending thresholds means we're asking everyone to make a contribution. But crucially, we're keeping that contribution from working people as low as possible because of the other decisions that we're taking.
James, I just put it to you, it's going to feel like a broken promise. And in terms of the politics, those tax rises are going to be felt by people right across the country just in the run-up to the next general election. Can you persuade people that you're actually going to go ahead with this, or will you flinch when it comes nearer to the electorate?
Well, look, we've been upfront about the fact this will have an impact. We're asking everyone to contribute toward the measures that we sent out in the budget today. But overall, it's a progressive, fair set of decisions. It's a set of necessary decisions because of the challenges that we faced. You know, we know that the OBR have been reviewing the productivity under the previous government and the impact that austerity and the mishandling of Brexit has had on the productivity of our economy. They've revised the productivity down, which has had an impact in future years as a result of what happened under 14 years of the Conservatives. But what we're saying is that look at what's happened to growth this year, revise upward. You know, we're determined to keep going to push growth up to make sure that we don't respond to challenges by uncontrolled borrowing or returning to austerity or cutting public investment, but we do that with fair and necessary decisions, and that's what we set out today.
The OBR leaked the entire budget before it was actually launched by the Chancellor. Should heads roll for that?
Well, look, it's incredibly frustrating and it's a very serious matter for that to come out just before the budget. I think the OBR...
Give me an answer on whether heads should roll.
Well, the OBR have said they're doing an investigation. I'm going to let that carry on. But actually, one of the biggest frustrations for me is that we're now talking about the OBR's process, rather than the fact we've taken £150 off energy bills to help with the cost of living crisis.
This hasn't happened in the history of budgets ever. It was a heck of a moment.
Oh, it's a really serious moment, absolutely. Yeah. And they've taken full responsibility. They're doing an investigation into it. But I'd much rather talk about the £150 off energy bills.
I'm sure you would. Let me talk about something else, however, which is the mansion tax, so-called, which is going ahead. How are you going to accurately value houses for that?
So that will be a process that the valuation office will carry out. Only those properties.
So the valuation office centrally is going to value every single house in the country.
No, only those at the top end of the spectrum. Only the most valuable homes.
So how do they do it? I mean, literally, are people going to go around the streets trying to work out what each house is valued at?
Well, the valuation office have established valuation methodologies already, so they know how to value properties, and we're going to have a technical consultation about implementing this measure. It comes in a few years' time. But the principle is that those people who have properties worth more than £2 million should make a contribution, which is how our tax package is fair.
And many of those people are well able to afford that contribution. But there are plenty of others who have been living in a house for sort of 50 years. They don't have much of an income. They're maybe retired people or whatever. How are you going to deal with people who are in expensive houses but don't have the money to pay your impost?
That's an important point to raise, and part of the consultation on the technical detail and the implementation of this measure will look at how we can help people who might be in that situation where they live in an expensive home.
So you will be helping people in that situation.
We'll be designing the system to make sure it takes their circumstances into consideration. But the bigger picture here is that when it comes to people who live in properties worth more than £2 million, when we talk about some of the reforms to the tax system that we set out today, whether that's electric vehicle charging or gambling taxation, these are decisions which were necessary. They are the right decisions to take. They are fair decisions. And it means that we've kept the tax contribution for working people as low as possible.
Is this budget enough to save the Chancellor and the Prime Minister from a leadership challenge in the winter?
Well, look, I think the Chancellor has set out a really strong budget today.
It's actually a serious question, because you know how turbulent the benches are behind her. Do you think the two-child cap movement is going to change things?
I was in the House of Commons for her budget speech today, and you had 400 Labour MPs fully behind what the Chancellor is doing, because we got elected on a promise of making sure we were protecting public services, that we're investing in infrastructure across our country. The values of fairness would guide us in our decisions, that we'll get debt down, we'll stick to our fiscal rules, we'll have stability in the economy. All of that is what this budget was focused on.
So as a result of those things, you are convinced that Rachel Reeves will be delivering the budget next year as well?
And the year after, and the year after. I think, look, Rachel has set out a plan for the whole of this Parliament and beyond, because we know that turning the country around from the mess that we inherited is not something that's going to happen overnight. Keir has said that, Rachel has said that. They both know this is a long-term plan. It's a long-term mission.
It's a long-term plan. It's a make-or-break moment as well.
We've started on it. And if you look at what's happened, this year we've had the growth forecast for this year revised upward from 1% to 1.5%. We know there are challenges ahead because of the OBR reviewing productivity over the 14 years of the previous government, but we set out a plan to deal with that, which doesn't take the routes of uncontrolled borrowing.
And you can genuinely see a gleam of
fairly.
light ahead for the economy.
Absolutely. And can I just take one final point on that? Because, a lot of the focus of the budget is about making sure that young people have opportunities. There's a lot in there about young people avoiding a life on benefits by getting into work, about investment in skills and opportunities, investment in infrastructure in every part of the country. That's how we make a better future.
James Murray, thank you very much indeed, because I must now bring in Mel Stride for the opposition. Mel, first of all, on that huge leak, you suggested in the House of Commons this might be a criminal matter. Do you mean that?
Well, if there is information that is leaked that is market sensitive and therefore confers an advantage on some people and is not
And in the
readily
real world,
available,
this leak will have made people lots of money or lost people lots of money.
It depends on the basis. And I think where James is right is, we need to see where the inquiry into this, the investigation leads before jumping to conclusions as to what should follow. But nonetheless, it is a pretty serious matter. When, we were sitting there, Chancellor would have been sitting there too, and suddenly on our phones start popping with details of the actual budget itself. Quite an extraordinary matter.
I don't want to be too personal about this, but do you think the head of the OBR should be sacked for this?
No, I'm not going to be calling for Richard Hughes to go, certainly not at this point. I mean, we need to get to the bottom of what has happened, but we do need to do it in a measured and sensible way. But look, this does come on the back of, I have to say, weeks and months of speculation, kite flying by the Treasury as to what may or may not be in this budget, U-turns around whether income tax was going to be going up or not. And, of course, that has damaged the economy, which was exactly what Andy Haldane was previously saying.
Exactly.
Earlier on when you
It's been particularly bad this time. But previous budgets in the last few years, under the Conservatives as well as under this government, there have been leaks, there have been lots of rumours, and frankly, it's been bad for the economy. Businesses have not invested. They've held back to see what's going to happen. They haven't hired people. Consumers haven't been spending in quite the same way because they're worried. Surely this whole grandiose budget process has become no longer fit for purpose.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong per se with the budget process. In other words, a series of iterations around the forecast and measures as
it's done us more damage than
the Treasury
good.
And the OBR. But what we need is politicians in the Treasury who actually respect the fact that it is Parliament that is sovereign and announcements should be made to Parliament. And secondly, that details of budgets, fiscal details, should not be made public or floated or kites flown or however you choose to term it before the actual event itself. Hugh Dalton in 1947, as you will well know.
Absolutely. I mentioned him earlier on. He resigned.
Yes, exactly. The Evening Standard, I think it was.
It was.
Told a few things, and he was gone.
Bob Carver.
Those were the days.
Yeah,
Andrew.
absolutely. Your party has been very, very critical of this Chancellor and this government. She has different audiences, one of whom has been obviously the markets, the bond markets, the bankers. And they have not been unhappy about this budget. It's been very interesting. There was a kind of heart attack in the bond markets when the leak happened, but since then they've calmed down. They've done quite well on that, haven't they?
Well, it's too early to know exactly how the budget will land. As you all know, it's normally I always think about 3 days before you know exactly where a budget is going to land. So let's wait and see. But look, nobody wants to see us continuing to pay amongst the highest borrowing costs.
And Liz Truss is part of the reason
Greece.
for that.
Well,
it's part of the reason for that is Liz Truss.
Well, I would say that it is the choices that this Chancellor has taken. So firstly, that even though in opposition they said they wouldn't put up taxes left, right and centre, they did, particularly on businesses, which helped to destroy growth. They talked down the economy with a fictitious £22 billion black hole. They borrowed a lot of money, have spent a lot of money, about £500 billion more on spending across the Parliament compared to our plans, stoked inflation, kept interest rates higher.
I'm not sure the black hole was fictitious.
It
was
the
OBR,
it was to get back to the OBR, were asked to look into this at the behest of the current government, and they did not, in their terms, they used the word legitimise the claim that there was a £22 billion
let me just read you, because, as I say, your party has been very, very critical of the Chancellor, something that Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan Chase, and probably the most influential and respected banker in the world today, has just said. He said, this Chancellor's focus on financial discipline is something that the market should welcome, as is the encouragement of retail participation in UK capital markets. Focusing on measures to foster growth in the UK economy over the long term is the only way to truly lift up everyone. If Jamie Dimon likes it, then that's very, very good news for the country.
Well, some people will like it, some people won't like it. I don't like it, and the reason I don't like it... there are many bankers and financial services people that would take a very different view, and many members of the public that would take a very different view. I do, sadly. I mean, you can see it in the forecast. Now, James says that growth this year is up. Now, he's right. It's up on the spring forecast. It's actually down on the budget forecast back in the autumn. And every other month of that forecast growth is down on the spring forecast. And that doesn't happen by accident. Okay. That happens because you take the wrong choices around tax and spending, and particularly around welfare.
You've spoken a lot about welfare, of course, and that was your specialty in the past. The really big growth in the welfare budget, actually, overall, has been for pensioners. and the effect of the triple lock, or as you wanted in the election, the triple lock plus, it's gone up from something like 2% of GDP back in the 50s and 60s to more than 8% now. What proposals would you have to start to bring down that, as it were, bloated and ever-increasing pensions bill?
So on the pensions front, we are very clear that we stand by the triple lock. And I think that's important because if you go back to...
It goes up.
We will stand by the triple lock. If you go back to the last Labour government, we had the fourth highest level of pensioner poverty in Europe. And the triple lock was part of arresting that situation. And of course, pensioners can't adjust their economic circumstances as readily as other people, get another job or work more hours and so on. So I think it just
seems to me, if you had your way, it would be austerity for everybody else, pensioners protected. And you may not like what they've done today, but
Andrew,
your alternative...
there is another way. And the other way, which unfortunately, I think largely... for political reasons, this government has not been able to deliver on, and that is to tackle government spending, to get that under control. Now, we saw what happened when they tried to get on top of that.
We're going to come on to that in a little bit later in the show, but we are out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you very, very much, Mel Stride, and thank you very, very much indeed, James Murray, for coming in and talking to me. Mel's boss, Kemi Badenoch, by the way, will be with Iain Dale taking your calls from 7, so do get in touch if you've got a question to put to her. Now, up next, what do the Liberal Democrats make of the budget? We'll find out with their deputy leader, but the time now, 6:34, and here is Tim Humphrey with your news headlines.
Rachel Reeves has denied breaking Labour's general election manifesto pledges after announcing £26 billion worth of tax rises. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says she has by freezing income tax thresholds until 2031 and making pension contributions over £2,000 eligible for national insurance. A so-called mansion tax will be levied on homes worth more than £2 million. A pay-by-mile duty will apply to electric vehicles. The fuel duty freeze will be scrapped in September. A former Royal Marine has admitted deliberately ramming his car into crowds of football fans in Liverpool last May. Paul Doyle pleaded guilty to 31 offences after ploughing through people celebrating Liverpool's Premier League title victory. The LBC weather: rain will move east tonight, but it will remain heaviest in the northwest, a low of 8 degrees.
The Budget. Get the reaction from the Leader of the Opposition at 7 p.m. only on LBC. Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:36. Now, earlier on, I asked you to tell me what you thought about this budget, and this is LBC, and you are lovely people, and you never disappoint. Here is Jeff in Surrey. I'm a 73-year-old pensioner, he says. I get just over £1,000 a month state pension and a really small £102 a month private pension gross. I'm currently now paying 48 quid on that 102 in income tax. How on earth can this be the right thing? Now, with a freeze on allowances, it'll take more tax. Meanwhile, costs are rising to eat further into my ever-reducing pension. Reeves is hitting pensioners with a very small private pension very hard. But here's Samuel, and he is pretty pleased with the announcements today. This is a nuanced and detailed breakdown I was looking for until now. I hope he's listening to this programme, that's what he means. Not overly praising Labour, but not overly criticising them. When, to be fair, there appears to be a fiscal plan, maybe even a strategy, that actually tries to address a structural problem that impacts outcomes across all of our lives. Addressing capital and growth blockers is not a small thing. Indeed, it is not. We've heard just now from Labour and from the Tories on this dramatic day. But what about the Liberal Democrats? I'm joined now by Daisy Cooper, their deputy leader. Daisy, that listener was talking about the difficult structural problems, and there is a word we are just beginning to hear from the Prime Minister and Chancellor a little more often, and that word is Brexit.
Well, we have heard them talking about Brexit, and they seem to accept now that Brexit has been a disaster for the country. What they're not doing is offering any solution as to how they're going to fix it. And that's really frustrating. Just in the last week or so, there's been some new analysis which shows that Brexit has left a £90 billion black hole in our finances. That's the amount of money that we have lost in revenue that we would have had we not have left the EU. And we want to see the government getting really serious and really ambitious about improving that deal.
But you don't want to go back either.
Well, look, we've said that the Labour government, if they were ambitious within their own red lines, which excludes, customs union, single market, everything else within their own red lines, they could be getting an additional £25 billion per year. And we Liberal Democrats want to go further and get a bespoke customs union.
And that means basically becoming rule takers. That means saying to the EU, you set the rules and we will follow them.
Look, we are already a rule taker because so many of our businesses are here in the UK and want to trade with you.
I just want to be clear about this. Let's be straightforward. It does mean taking their rules much more seriously.
Well, at the moment, we are a rule taker, but what we're saying is we want to have a bespoke customs union and we would negotiate that through the negotiations. But there's absolutely no doubt. If you look at the OBR's report today, it is in black and white. The damage done by Brexit wipes out any benefit from the combined of all of the new trade deals that have been done. We have got to get a better deal with Brexit, with Europe, if we want to grow our economy.
I'm not denying the numbers at all. I'm just saying, bespoke is a lovely word, but in the end, it does mean, and this is the sovereignty argument, it does mean taking their rules right across British industry, right across commerce.
We already take most of the EU's rules because they are our closest trading partner. You can't fight geography.
We choose to. It's a bit different if they say you have to.
We choose to because we really have no choice because they are right on our doorstep. You cannot fight geography. And the reality is that we're taking their rules, but at the same time, we're being wrapped up in red tape. 2 billion pieces of paper have had to be completed by British businesses since the Brexit deal. That is enough to go around the world 15 times. Wouldn't it be great if we could just get rid of all that red tape, unleash British businesses, get growth back into our economy and raise the money we need to invest in our public services, all without having to raise taxes on struggling families?
Well, let's turn to those taxes because obviously what they're doing is they're going to freeze thresholds, which means millions upon millions of people will be paying more in income tax by the time of the next election, and they'll notice it before that happens, of course. Now, these have been called stealth taxes, but there's nothing stealthy about this, is there?
No, you're absolutely right. It's pretty shocking. These are huge sums of money. I think the IFS came out today and said that this has been the single biggest tax raiser since 1979 in this country. Absolutely amazing, dazzling numbers. And by 2030, the combined impact of the Conservatives' stealth taxes, the freezes on income tax, the combined total of the Conservatives and Labour means that by 2030, British taxpayers will be paying an additional £67 billion. This is eye-watering.
If you were in government now, you would have exactly the same constraints as the Chancellor does. You would be surrounded by the same walls with the bond markets here and the voters there and all the rest of it. Which taxes would you be raising?
Well, let me say there are two things. First of all, we keep saying we'd be constrained by the same issues. We are the only party saying, let's go for growth. Let's not accept that the size of the pie...
They're saying go for growth. Everyone's saying go for growth.
Sure, but we're saying how you would do it, and they're not. Growth has stalled. That has been the conclusion of the CBI and others today.
So you think you wouldn't have to raise taxes?
No, so there are two things. First of all, we would go for growth by getting a better deal with Europe. And secondly, we would raise taxes on...
Which ones?
We'd have a windfall tax on the big banks. We would increase the digital services tax on Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. We would we'd be doubling gaming duty. Lots of ways you can raise taxes without pressing hard-pressed families.
If Mark Zuckerberg is listening, I hope he will tweet in and tell us what he thinks about that. But for the now, Daisy Cooper, thank you so much for coming in. Now, enough for a moment of the politics. This is really, of course, about you today. You, the taxpayer, you, the employer, you, the employee, you, the consumer, and the household budgeter. Let's hear next, therefore, from Helen Miller, the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, alternatively known as an interviewee who really knows stuff. Helen, you know stuff. Tell us stuff. Let's talk first of all about the overall shape of the budget. The Chancellor is raising in tax a little bit more than half of the extra spending that she's announced. How important is that for the amount of money that we as a country pay for interest?
Yeah, so it's a big budget. As you said, there's a big tax increase here. In part, that's to pay for additional spending. In part, it's to allow Rachel Reeves to build a bigger buffer against her so-called fiscal rules, so to allow her to have more wiggle room. So the markets at the moment seem to be quite relaxed about this budget. So there hasn't been a big jump in the cost of borrowing. Rachel Reeves will be hoping that's because the market is comfortable with the extra borrowing that she's doing, with the headroom she's making. But make no mistake, this is a big tax rise that most people will feel, but not today. The shape of the budget is such that in the short run, there is more borrowing and more spending. The tax rises are coming in later in the Parliament near the election.
I think that is one of the sort of big puzzles about this budget, which is, as you say, it's going to come just before the election at a time when it will cause the maximum pain to Labour MPs. Now, whether it's Rachel Reeves still in the Treasury or somebody else, is there not a serious danger or possibility that that Chancellor at the time will not go ahead with this, will announce that the tax thresholds are not going to be frozen anymore? And if that's the case, if the bond markets think that's going to happen, then they're going to punish us for that, aren't they?
Yeah, so there is a risk there. There's always, governments often backload their budgets and say, we'll have the good stuff today and we'll have the tax rises or the spending cuts later. They don't tend to be as good as delivering that as they are at saying it. So I think it's right to question whether it's going to happen in quite the way it's being planned at the moment, especially because, as you said, so close to an election. Will Labour want to be paring back their spending and increasing taxes? It's to be seen. Again, that credibility matters. In some sense, it matters at the moment because it affects how much investors want to charge us when they lend money to the government. But looking beyond that, it matters for the country. This is all predicated on what do we really care about here? We care about managing the public finances. I think it makes sense for us to get to a position where we are having revenues cover our day-to-day spending and debt is coming down. If we don't see the plans that the Chancellor announced today actually followed through on, we won't be in that position. So it really matters that we do eventually get there, because that's what's really going to matter for the country long term.
Daisy Cooper, just out from the Liberal Democrats, was saying quite rightly that in the end it's all about getting growth. Are the measures in this budget that you think will help growth, are the measures you think that will actually prevent growth from happening?
Yeah, so in big picture, I don't think this was a big sort of pro-growth budget. You could point to some measures that will maybe drag on growth a bit, some measures that will be a bit more positive. But just taking the tax rise, there were lots of measures there. Some of them were reformed in a good direction, some are not the direction that I would have chosen. But it just wasn't a big tax reforming budget, actually, despite some of the narrative around it. So I don't think it'll do a huge amount to damage growth, but this was not an opportunity grab to try to reform taxes to have them pushing in a positive direction. It's
a kind of take a big breath and squeak through kind of budget, therefore.
Yeah, well, stepping back, though, it's a bit surprising. In some sense, it was a getting through budget. But if we think back to only a few hours ago, the narrative going into this budget was that Rachel Reeves would have been handed a big fiscal repair job by the Office of Budget Responsibility, and therefore she had to respond. She had to do something. Actually, in the event, one of the big surprises today is that the Office of Budget Responsibility didn't hand her a big fiscal repair job, actually. It was much, much smaller than most people expected. And therefore, what she chose to do today was a choice. She didn't have to do anything in some sense, or didn't have to do as much as she did. She chose to go as far as she did on tax rises, partly to build up that headroom we talked about, but also partly to fund higher spending. So part of this was a classic tax and spend budget. But I think that's interesting in the context of having spent months where everyone's speculating that her hand will be forced in some sense. It wasn't.
Is this part of the reason behind the horlicks of a sort of the mess running into this budget? Because if the OBR's figures, as I'm told, change from there's a 40 billion hole to, oh no, there's only a 20 billion hole, that would explain why a few weeks ago the Chancellor was looking at breaking her manifesto directly and raising income tax by a couple of pence in the pound for everybody. And so in a sense that if she is working with such uncertain, you might say dodgy information, it makes the job very hard indeed.
It does, but I'm not sure that's what's happened. So I'd like to chew through the document a bit more, but the Chancellor would have had the final so-called pre-measures forecast at the end of October. So that's where the OBR sets out what they think is happening in the economy before you take account of anything the Chancellor is going to do on policy. And then she would have had a few rounds before that. I don't think anything changed in the world that would lead me to expect the OBR to have made big revisions to its forecast over that period. So it looks to me actually like Rachel Reeves would have had all the information that we have today about the pre-measures forecast at the end of October, which does, given that we now know what that forecast looked like, because it's set out in black and white today, does make Rachel Reeves's breakfast TV speech actually look a bit strange, I think. It's less clear what she was trying to achieve in that speech, given that the forecast we can now see.
On that, we can absolutely agree. It looked strange at the time. It looks even stranger in retrospect. Helen Miller, thank you very, very much indeed for talking to me. Now then, in a few minutes, we're going to be hearing from voices across the country on how the budget will impact voters in their day-to-day lives. In a cost of living crisis, will these measures really make a difference? Time now, 6:48.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Iain Dale.
It's a budget-tastic show today, and we'll be getting your reaction to the budget after 9. We have a Treasury Minister on Cross Question, but first, the woman who clearly had 3 Weetabix for breakfast, Kemi Badenoch.
Iain Dale at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or our new LBC app. Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:50. Now, more messages coming in all the time. Vicky says that she's also concerned about the impact of this on pensioners. She says, save for your old age, they said. We can't promise to look after you, they said. Now the small interest we earned, having saved, as was told, additional tax will be taken. OK for the big wealthy, not so clever for the small pensioner who has saved. And David has this point about wage increases. He says, I really feel that the increase in the minimum wage must be lauded both ethically and pragmatically. Young people are on the lowest wages, and so any increase will mean more to them than to most other groups. Fair point, David. He also says, in practical terms, young people are more likely to spend any additional income and inject more demand into the economy, which will be beneficial for industry and business. True that as well. Thank you very much, David. Let us now break away, however, from Westminster and hear from the real Britain. Our reporters are here to take us on a tour around areas of Scotland where people are feeling the cost of living very keenly, through to the Chancellor's own constituency in Leeds and also the reform-controlled Maidstone on the south coast. Let's go first to our Scotland correspondent, Alan Zazinski, who spent the day in the East End of Glasgow.
Yes, where I've been speaking to parents and carers about the benefit cap being scrapped, because it's in communities like this in which more than a third of children are living in poverty, nearer half when you look at bigger families, where the government will say this is going to make a difference. Just how much, though, with bills still so high, is being questioned by those that I've been hearing from.
Got 3 kids, it's hard. I own my own business, but it's still difficult. Heating, electricity, even the cost of petrol, food, everything. It's ridiculous.
We're being skinned alive. People can't eat at the moment and heat their house. This is the UK in 2025.
I've just told Deb they need to cut down presents at Christmas because I can't afford it this year.
People are really struggling and it's awful.
And we have also been getting reaction from the Chancellor's own constituency in Leeds. Our correspondent Alex Taylor-Brown is there.
There are a couple of things that have gone down well here in Rachel Reeves' constituency, not least the two-child benefit cap being scrapped. Karen Bergen is from Leeds North and West Food Bank, who operates in parts of the Chancellor's constituency. She actually met Rachel Reeves last week. She tells me how it will help the people that they support.
Over the moon. I think it'll have such an impact on some of the families that we see that have been pushed into having to use a food bank. So, yeah, I'm genuinely very happy about it. I mean, I think it'll stop pushing those people to need to come to the food bank if they have enough money in their pockets to be able to support their children themselves.
The freeze in national insurance costs for employers also has an impact. Food banks obviously have to pay staff, so the fact that that's being held is a positive here. This food bank in particular are having to fork out tens of thousands of pounds per month just to keep shelves stocked. So plenty of positives, but there is a feeling that more could have been done to help people on universal credit, for example. Now let's head to our correspondent in the southeast, Emma Core, who's been speaking to voters in Maidstone in Kent.
Thanks, Alex. Maidstone is a place feeling the reform surge after Nigel Farage's party gained plenty of votes in this year's local elections and drawing support from voters frustrated with Labour and the Conservatives. Here on the High Street, people have been telling me this budget hasn't shifted their concerns.
Not sure Rachel Reeves really quite understands the tax system.
The sort of raid on our pensions and ISAs and all this sort of stuff.
Labour, in my mind, has always been a tax government. Every time they've got in.
If you worked hard, you made good money. Now, people say, friends of mine say, it's not worth it.
That's not where the money should come from, the people who are paying tax. No way. It's disgusting, to be honest with you, what is happening.
This town and area has long been Tory heartland, but now reform are reshaping the landscape here, and people still seem hungry for change, not convinced this budget has delivered it.
So LBC has taken you on our brisk bus tour around the country, but finally tonight, let us return to Westminster, here to chew over the politics of all of this and spit out the pips. I'm joined by LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark, and our political correspondent, Aggie Shornbury. Aggie, first of all, absolutely essential question. How is this going down with Labour MPs?
It's actually going down pretty well with Labour MPs. There's just been a parliamentary Labour Party, which Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was at. Apparently the vibes were great. Everyone was very happy. And you would sort of expect that, wouldn't you? Because I think there were many things about this budget, but it was a sort of parliamentary Labour Party facing budget. Having said that, I think there is still trepidation about how it's going down with the rest of the country, what the headlines are going to be like tomorrow. And also question marks over how they're going to be able to sell it. It was something Rachel Reeves actually said during that parliamentary Labour Party meeting, saying we have to win the argument for the budget. And I was just speaking to one minister who was basically saying, look, it is not the case that we are kind of squeezing the middle to pay for benefits, but we need to be making that case. We need to be making that argument. So I think that will be kind of concerning them in the days going forward.
The reason I said I thought this was an essential question is, as we both know, there is a really mutinous and hostile mood towards Keir Starmer and indeed Rachel Reeves in the Parliamentary Labour Party, and lots of talk of some kind of move against him over the winter. Do you think this budget has stopped that happening?
No, absolutely not. I think it is potentially, well, it is now the case that they are not going to rebel over the budget, I think. But I think the proof will be in the pudding over May and potentially before May.
Absolutely. OK. Natasha, let's just go back to the beginning of the day when we were all watching the beginning, waiting for the budget to start. And suddenly it became clear that for the first time in anyone's lifetime, the entire budget had been leaked. At that point, it felt as if the roof was falling in.
Yes, but it was great for us, wasn't it? So we could get a 2-hour head start on reading the budget, which was fantastic. But yes, I've got an expletive-filled text from a Treasury official, a head and hands emoji from another, which is understandable because this does not happen. And James Murray told you earlier today they've got a full investigation into that. I'm sure there are some heads that will roll. It is totally unprecedented to put this budget out in this way.
How did you feel that Rachel Reeves did? I was quite interested. I was watching her face. It's like a punch to the solar plexus. Only a few few minutes before she stands up to deliver the speech?
You know what? I think she styled it out. I think she did incredibly well. I think it was a very strong Commons performance. She certainly seemed very confident. I think Kemi Badenoch's response to her obviously was trying to rub salt in the wounds, talking about the last time she was here. She was crying in the Commons and, terrible budget, this, that and the other. But actually, I think it was a very strong Commons performance from Rachel Reeves. She got her key points out. I don't think it really blew the government off course at all today. And actually, obviously, we've been hearing all of these rumours about what's going to be in the budget for so long. One more doesn't really hurt, does it?
Well, it was certainly entertaining. Final question. We all know that judging a budget on the day is a very dangerous and silly thing to do. And there are massive tax rises now penned in coming ahead of the years. How dangerous do you think this has been politically?
This has strengthened Rachel Reeves within the Parliamentary Labour Party and within government. I think it's given her some more time in the short term. But will this have harmed the Labour's chances of re-election in the long term? I think the answer is probably yes. I'm looking through some of the sneaky small print tax rises, and even I'm being surprised by, an extra jets tax, an extra landlord's tax, the end of the fuel duty freeze, which we didn't get on to talking about with Sheila Fogarty earlier today. The idea that pensioners are going to be next year or the year after, I believe, dragged into paying income tax on their pensions. That's going to be incredibly unpopular.
So no huge manifesto-breaking rise in income tax, but lots of really irritating little bombs going off around the economy.
Exactly, and we only need to look at what happened on welfare and, what happened on the winter fuel allowance to know that this government is capable of making those big U-turns. Any one of these has the potential to blow up in the days and weeks ahead.
What a day. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, if you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion, put your news categories in the order you want, pause, rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. So download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Iain Dale.
Thanks, Andrew. One of the most difficult
Kemi. Put your questions to the Leader of the Conservative Party now. Call 0345 6060 973.
Hello, a very good evening and welcome to the show. It's Iain Dale here with you until 10 for the first hour of this evening's show. We're going to be streaming live on the LBC app, Global Player and the LBC YouTube channel. So you might want to ask questions through that. But Kemi Badenoch is here for the next hour. I think it's the first time a Leader of the Opposition has actually done a phone-in on Budget Day. So you're making history kind of today, Kemi. Welcome back.
Very happy to.
How many Weetabix did you take before your speech in the Commons today?
Cheerios. Cheerios is the breakfast cereal that we have in my house. But I didn't need any breakfast today. I was just so upset by how much pain is being inflicted on households up and down the country. And I see my job as the person who represents what they're thinking. And I had to make sure that their voices were heard.
Got very personal, though, didn't it?
Well, I think it often is. I mean, they were very personal about us. She was very personal about Conservatives in her budget speech. But she also uses her person as a means of defence. I was quite surprised at how much she blamed her being a woman on the criticism that she's been getting. You know, it's full. The weekend papers were full of, oh, it's all misogyny, it's mansplaining. And I had to tell her, woman to woman, it's not got nothing to do with mansplaining. You're just not doing a good job.
But you must have had a bit of mansplaining in your time. You must have understood what she meant by that.
I did. Honestly, there are people who maybe can be a bit annoying, but they, when they're explaining things, but they're both men and women. I've never bought into this, oh, it's a mansplaining thing. And I don't use my gender as a shield for criticism. Some people may think I'm doing a good job. Some people may think I'm doing a bad job. I will disagree with them quite a lot of times. Sometimes they might be right if I've made a mistake. But what I don't do is say, oh, it's because I'm a woman that they're criticising me, or it's because I'm black, or just using identity as a shield, I think is very dangerous. And it also means that a lot of people think that you got the job because of those things. Oh, you only got the job because you're a girl, or you only got the job because you're a minority. I think I have a duty to make sure that people see that women, ethnic minorities, others get their jobs on merit, and Rachel Reeves does us no favours.
We're going to come to calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973 if you want to ask Kemi a question right up until 8 o'clock. But let me ask you a couple of questions before we come to the calls. Now, the Chancellor is very clear that the tax rises that she's announced today are a reaction to the OER's rather grim projections, which she blames almost entirely on your party's record in office. How much responsibility do you take for this budget?
This 22 billion that she said at the last budget, the OBR actually said they found no such hole. They did not recognise that figure. What happened is that Labour came in and the first thing they wanted to do was settle scores and scratch the itches that they had in opposition. They had a window to fix things, and they put taxes on all the people who don't vote for them. Farmers, people who send their kids to private school, businesses thinking, well, we're not going to have a problem. But those are the people, businesses, farmers, those are the people who create growth. And all of a sudden, jobs are disappearing. Unemployment has risen every single month. This problem is of her own making. She had a job-destroying budget, growth has flatlined, and now she's had to come back for more.
Well, they're predicting 1.5% growth this year, which was far more than your government achieved.
It's still far less than what they were predicting for them when they first came in.
But it's more than most other Western countries.
But it's still a prediction. A prediction is not reality. Let's see what actually happens. What has happened since Labour came in? Growth has flatlined. So what's going to change? There were no growth measures in this budget. They're taxing people to pay for welfare. So why is there going to be growth? They're chasing people out of the country. 1 in 8 business leaders is leaving, according to the papers. Even their biggest donors, Lakshmi Mittal, fleeing the country. All of the people that we would like to see staying, a lot of the people we'd like to see staying are leaving. We've got to fix that.
Some suggest that the income tax threshold freeze breaks Labour's manifesto commitment. Now, they would say, well, we haven't put up the basic rate of income tax, so we haven't broken our manifesto pledge. But millions more people are going to be dragged into the top rate, aren't they?
Exactly. I think we're going to see about 1 million people paying the top rate of tax. I think we're going to see about 750,000 people who never paid income tax because they earned so little. They're going to be dragged into the tax, into that basic rate of tax paying. and people are going to feel poorer. The sum total of this budget is that households will be poorer because of it. That was in the OBR report. I think it says household income is going to go down. So we have a government that is making us all poorer.
Well, they do say that, but they also say that the majority of households who are earning sort of less maybe than the top households, they are going to be better off.
I think that we should see. Will they be better off if they're not having jobs? Look at a lot of the things that have come in. What I get from my constituents when I'm in my surgery is that it's not just one thing. It's the combination of things. It's not just employers' NI. It's the changing of the thresholds. It's what they're doing on the different taxes. I will have constituents who have gone and bought an electric vehicle because they maybe had a subsidy from the previous government. They live in a rural area and they don't think that they have to pay fuel duty. They've been whacked with something. Landlords have been whacked. They're taxing, it's just everything. Holidays, milkshakes, just all sorts of random things. There are 43 taxes in this budget. That's going to hit a hell of a lot of people.
But the markets like it, don't they? I mean, the FTSE index has soared today, which is... I mean, at first I thought, well, how come? Because there are so many tax rises in this budget. But you have Jamie Dimon, one of the sort of richest businessmen in the world, saying, well, no, she's been fiscally responsible. Business will like this. And you see the stock market rising. So why should people believe you as the leader of the opposition rather than the stock market?
Because they have to look at what happened before the budget. The markets were reacting very, very badly to a lot of the announcements she was putting out. So the markets have already reacted. And what the markets have said is she going to have enough cash to carry out, just to continue being a budget? The market is not interested in how much money your household has or how much money my household has. The market is interested in whether the government is going to be able to pay its debt and whether it's going to be taking on more debt. And it's going to keep doing that. But the cash flow is coming from making us all poorer. That is not a good place to be.
Right, let's go to some calls, shall we? Let's go to Kirsty in High Wycombe. Hello, Kirsty.
Hi.
Hello, what's your question to Kemi?
So, Minister, today in the House of Commons, you used the phrase budget for Benefit Street when speaking about the two-child limit. As a full-time social worker and a single mother of 3 who relies on universal credit despite working, I need to tell you that language that you used, it fuels stigma and backlash against ordinary families who are simply trying to stay afloat. The two-child policy directly affects working parents like me, so I will gain around £120 a month from the uplift. And if stopped working tomorrow and I went onto full universal credit, the benefit cap would wipe out any additional support anyway. So the idea that people are having children for benefits isn't just offensive, it's actually untrue. So my question is, why are you so against lifting the two-child limit when we have strong evidence that it pushes children into poverty? In my job, I see every day how child poverty damages development, it increases mental health difficulties, it puts huge pressure on social care, education and the health services, and poverty now costs the taxpayer more in the long run. So given all the evidence on child outcomes and future public spending, why are you so set against removing this cap?
So let's start off with the child poverty question. We need to understand where the money is coming from. This money is being borrowed from future generations, and we are paying more and more money to pay off the debt interest. We can't afford it. Government has to live within its means. And I do understand that your personal circumstances are difficult. I do understand. But there is no limit on child benefit. There's no limit on the amount of child benefit you can claim on the number of children. We are purely talking about the universal credit element of child benefit. And I do think it is fair that families who are struggling don't have to pay for other families. And some of those families may want more children. They don't have them. I know lots of families who said this, that I would have liked more children. I couldn't afford them. I don't think it is fair to ask them to pay. It doesn't mean that we think that you're all right. But the thing that's going to deal with child poverty is people getting more in their pay and having jobs. Right now, jobs are being destroyed. And the way that Rachel Reeves is running the country means that we're going to have more and more people going on benefits and fewer people there to pay for it. The government doesn't have any money. It gets all the money from all the other people who are out there working. That's the real problem.
Kirsty?
Well, I'm one of those taxpayers that you're talking about. I am a full-time social worker and I rely on that as a top-up. And I think that actually, children shouldn't carry the consequences of adult choices. We don't means test for healthcare or primary school based on the number of children somebody has. And I think actually, like major economic analysis, it shows that child poverty, it costs far more through social care. I'm a social worker and I work directly with children and families that are impacted by poverty. And we're talking about the workforce, but, if we've got children growing up in poverty and their childhood experiences means that they're more likely to go through the criminal justice system, they're more likely to have mental health issues when they're older, then we're then going to be creating that generational thing.
I think it is really important that we tackle child poverty. But if we cannot afford to do it this way, then we're just storing up more problems for later. And we're going to have more child poverty in the next generation. And that's a real issue.
That is a fair point, though, that Kirsty raises. It's not the children's fault for the choices or circumstances of their parents, is it?
It is never the children's fault for the choices and circumstances of their parents, but government has to draw a limit somewhere. And we believe that that is where it is fair to draw the limit. Now, Kirsty may disagree, the Labour Party may disagree, but if we take the arguments to the logical conclusion that the government should just pay for anything and everything as long as people feel it's necessary, we will all be bankrupt.
And are you going to promise to reverse this decision?
Yes, we have said that we will reverse this decision. The two-child benefit...
Even if in 2029, which they will say the election is likely to be then, even if, say, the economy has got lots of growth and it's a lot better than it is now, you would still reverse it?
If the economy is getting lots of growth, then that means that everybody is going to be lifted up. I mean, Kirsty herself has said it, that people aren't having children because of the two-child benefit cap. So it won't be that people have made decisions based on this. We think that it is fair to have it. We have said that we would reverse it. We think what Labour is doing is wrong. They are taxing other people to pay more benefits. Other people are going to be pushed into poverty to pay for benefits for others. I don't think that's fair.
We've got a follow-up caller on this subject from Justin in Purley. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to ask?
Good evening, Kemi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. I heard you today. I think you're kind of a bit rude to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I understand why. And also, just on the reaction of the markets, I remember a certain Kwasi Kwarteng doing a budget a while ago, and the market reacting quite badly to his budget. But get to where I was going to with child benefit. I had the benefit of having 4 children between 2002 and 2008, so I qualified for child benefit for all 4 of my children, and it helped us out quite a bit, kept us going. I was full-time work. My wife took some time off to look after the children, and the child benefit was there just to keep topping it up. So I think the child benefit is actually a very good benefit for children to have. Also, the moment the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, George Osborne, imposed it, he was informed by various charities and organisations that it would have a negative effect on the birth rate of the country, which I believe if you look at the figures now, you'll see that's actually happened. And we've had a massive drop in birth rate in this country. That's from the people not realising or not feeling that they're comfortable enough to have children because they can't afford to. Also, it's various other...
What's wrong with that, Justin? I mean, surely anybody should make a decision as to whether to have a child, as to whether they can afford to bring it up.
Yes, but no. If you want to have a big family, you shouldn't be held back because the country says, "Oh no, you can only have 2." We should allow. I understand that argument completely.
Right. Okay, so what is your actual question?
People with 10 to 15 questions. Why do you think it's a bad thing to help families out?
I don't think it's a bad thing to help families out. So first of all, we're not talking about child benefit. Everybody can still get child benefit if they qualify for as many children as they want. What we are talking about is a cap on the universal credit element of child benefit. That's an additional thing. It costs thousands of pounds. It's very expensive. This change that Rachel Reeves has made is going to cost £3 billion. That is a lot of money that other people are going to have to pay for. The money isn't coming from under the sofa. It's not being printed. Other people have to pay for it. And someone has to say, what is fair? How much should other people have to pay in order to subsidize a different group? And we are getting to a point where more and more people are net takers from the state and fewer people are net contributors. We have lots of people now who are working, but when you add up the benefits that they're getting, it's not, it's not balanced by what they're paying in tax. And so what's happening is that the country is borrowing. We are borrowing so much that we are now spending more on interest than we are on education, on so many other budgets. Who's going to pay for that? It's those same children who we should be thinking about. Why should we leave them with our debt? I think that's completely wrong.
But it is a fair point that Justin makes about the birth rate. Nigel Farage bangs on about this quite a lot as well. And if as a country we aren't going to have enough people working to effectively pay for my pension, but your pension in the end as well, then surely Justin's got a point that measures have to be taken to encourage people to have more children.
But we had a higher birth rate before we ever had a universal credit element of child benefit. I don't accept that argument. The birth rate problem is it's for all wealthy countries. Western countries, Japan has a similar problem. It's got nothing to do with whether there's a universal credit element of child benefit. Remember, we still get child benefit. We still have child benefit. So we shouldn't pretend that if we suddenly, give everyone all the child benefit they wanted, that would increase the birth rate. Okay. The birth rate has more to do with, women being more educated, lots of people choosing not to have children, and so on. And I'm not sure that simply giving people money is what's going to improve the birth rate.
Justin, thank you very much. Let's move on to another subject with Alex, who's a new caller in Westminster. Alex, hi, go ahead.
Hi, Kemi. Hi,
Hello.
Iain. Thanks for taking my call. Kemi, firstly, I had the pleasure of watching your budget reply from the gallery, and my God, was it incredible. So well done.
Thank you.
Firstly, if I may, on the mansion tax, I think there could be a lot of particularly older people who may be thinking of downsizing, but the mansion tax causes their house price to plummet. Mm-hmm. And so they don't want to sell and lose money, but they also already don't want to sell and move because of stamp duty.
That's right.
And so do you think that that's another barrier? And secondly, if I may, at the end of your statement, you said you're going to cut spending and cut taxes. I know you've outlined a few of your measures already, but do you think you could give us a few of areas that you're looking at, not specific policies, I know you're researching them, but a few areas that you're looking at in the long run for when you come to office? Thank you.
Thank you. We are looking at everything. How can we make sure that we can relieve the burden on people? So our golden economic rule is the formula that we have, that we need to make sure we find the savings first. We spend half of it on paying down the deficit because we're borrowing too much, and the rest we spend on taxes, on tax cuts and priorities. So abolishing stamp duty, I believe, will generate growth. It'll stimulate the housing market. I think you're absolutely right to point out that lots of people will price their houses differently, sell at different prices, just so that they don't fall into the new mansion tax category. A lot of the homes won't be mansions. They'll be small homes in expensive areas. Many of the people who live
Are you going to be hit by that?
No, I won't be hit by that. But I still have to speak for those people.
You live in Wimbledon, don't you? That's an expensive area.
Well, yes, but I don't live in an expensive house. But it is going to impact elderly people, many of whom got their homes before they became as valuable as they are. They fall into that same category as farmers, that they might be sitting on a valuable asset, but they don't make much money, and it's very difficult for them. So the issue, in my view, isn't about trying to have a fairer tax system. It is that the burden of tax is now so great. We had the highest ever tax rate last year. The cumulative impact of last year and this year means that no one has seen tax rises like this since the mid-1970s.
No, but to be fair, the tax burden at the end of your time in government was the highest since the Second World War. So
That's
it's
true.
not just Labour.
We had COVID. We were literally paying people to stay at home all across the country. We were paying for jabs. We were doing all sorts of things. Some things worked, some things didn't. But, there was even a clamour for us to do more. I remember sitting in the House of Commons chamber and people shouting at us that we weren't doing enough. And look at how much we ended up spending just to deal with COVID. We also had the energy crisis because of the war in Ukraine. So we didn't want to raise taxes. We had reasons for that. Raising taxes, in my view, is a Labour thing. This was a Labour budget. We shouldn't be doing that. There were extraordinary circumstances. I hope we never, ever have to do that again.
Let me take you back to something you said at the beginning of that answer. You said we're looking at everything. Does that include the pensions triple lock? Because to me and to a lot of our listeners, we talk about this a lot on the programme, particularly younger generations, think this cannot be sustained. And yet all the parties, apart from, I think, Reform, are committed to its continuation. And I understand why, because older people vote more than younger people do. But in the end, you can't go to the next election without surely looking at one of the major things that is causing the welfare bill to balloon.
Well, Alex asked about tax. We are looking at all the taxes. The triple lock is not a tax, so it's not in that category. But I have to explain the reason why we have said we are leaving the triple lock. It's a Conservative policy. It always has been. But the reason why we're having these issues is because we're not getting growth. What we need to do is to get people off welfare and into work, jobs that pay well. Moving around money from the triple lock does not create any growth. Getting people off welfare and into work creates growth. And a lot of the people who are getting their pensions are people who've paid in throughout their lives. They may be too old to get a job. They may not be, they have fixed incomes. Life is very difficult for them. When Conservatives came into power in 2010, we were dealing with a lot of pensioner poverty, and we don't want to see that again. That's why we're leaving the triple lock for now. We don't want to go into the next election. Well, we don't want to go into the next election talking about the triple lock. I have said that the triple lock is Conservative policy. It's something we stand by. Let's talk about the ballooning welfare budget.
But a lot of people think you can't address that without addressing the triple lock. And
I disagree.
Well, let me tell you, I have politician after politician who comes into this studio. We talk about the pensions triple lock, Liberal Democrat, Labour, Conservative, and then as soon as the red light goes off, they all, well, I say they all, a lot of them say, I do know that we have to deal with this. But we can't say so at the moment.
The reason why it is a problem is because we're not having growth. If we were growing at 2%, 3%, no one would even be talking about the triple lock. It is because we have no growth that we're now scrabbling around looking for what else we can slice and dice. We need to stop slicing and dicing and cutting everything and start growing our economy.
Alex, thank you. Let's go to Cody in Milton Keynes. Hello, Cody.
Hello. Good evening, Kemi.
Good evening.
I'm 17, and how easy do you think it'll be for young people to secure employment under Rachel's economic plan?
I think it's very bad news, Cody. I think it is going to be unbelievably difficult because Rachel Reeves has made it very expensive to hire young people. We now have the highest level of graduate unemployment on record. That is because it is now easier to hire a worker who is older than someone who is new into the workforce. And also the businesses which tend to start hiring young people first, retail, hospitality and leisure, have been the ones most hit by the jobs tax and the changes that she made in the thresholds on wages last year. Many of them are closing. That's why we're seeing a lot of unemployment. And I specifically said to her in my speech that she needs to do something for young people. They are going to bear the brunt of the mistakes that she is making.
OK, Cody, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to Graham in Totnes in Devon. Graham, good evening.
Good evening. Listening to you, Kemi, you spoke a lot about fairness, and I was wondering, therefore, why you would disagree with the idea of a modest tourist tax, because if you take the Torbay area, for instance, Torquay, Paynton, Brixham, its population in the winter is about 120,000, but in the summer it virtually doubles. And the tourists that come in obviously bring with them a number of commercial benefits, but they don't necessarily spill out through the local community that pays for services through their council tax. But they end up actually having to clear the litter, fix the roads, probably find that they're struggling to get decent standards of public transport, buses and so on, as well as standard issues like cleaning and maintaining public footpaths. So it would seem to me, on the basis of fairness, that it seems entirely reasonable that if somebody comes into an area and they make use of services there that they don't pay for as in the way that local people do with council taxes, that perhaps a modest charge would be an entirely reasonable thing. They themselves might actually enjoy being in a higher quality environment when they're on holiday.
So I think that a lot of people who are tourists don't necessarily have that much money. And what could happen is you make things more expensive and people just stop visiting a place. Now, perhaps for people who want to only, have staycations, who want to go somewhere in the UK, they don't have a choice. But people coming from abroad do have a choice. We are competing with France and Spain and Italy.
But some of those countries have tourist taxes. Yeah.
Yes, they do. But they also have beautiful sunshine, skiing, different types of beaches.
Well, we have a lot of sunshine. Well, not now, but in the summer we certainly did. We have skiing in Scotland. You're talking our country down, Kemi.
So yes, people might choose to ski in Scotland instead of skiing in France. I don't know. I'm not a skier. But the point I'm making is that every country is doing what it can to attract the most people. Right now, we got rid of things like VAT-free shopping. That was a tourist tax. And what we saw was a huge drop in people shopping in London. A lot of our luxury stores closed. And what's really sad is that many of them use suppliers all across the country, UK-made goods, very high value, very good quality, and it sent a chain reaction throughout the country. That's the sort of thing which a lot of people don't think about when they think, oh, well, we'll just get a tax and we'll get more money. But raising a tax doesn't always get more money.
Nobody's going to be forced to do this. I mean, it's going to be local areas that can decide whether they do this. I mean, as a Conservative, you believe in localism, sort of lowest decision-making place. So what's not to like about that? Let the local people decide.
Well, then why does it need to be in the Chancellor's budget?
Because at the moment, I don't think they are allowed to. I think Liverpool has already done this.
Yes, exactly. I haven't seen the full details of exactly what this means. With Labour, you have to wait and see the fine print. The last time we had a budget, there were all sorts of unintended consequences. But generally, Graham, to answer your question, there are externalities to having tourists. You're right. There are things that the local people have to clean up. But there is a risk to having a tourist tax. I just think that endlessly taxing every single thing, and just thinking that it's all going to be fine. Eventually, you hit a limit and people stop turning up. They stop paying. We're seeing a lot of people leave our country because they think the taxes are too high. I want us to do things that will get business growing, that will generate more wealth. Taxes don't do that.
So the basic thing is if you go to Totnes, we should all take our litter home. Then you wouldn't have to pay a tax.
We should not be messing up all these lovely areas.
Okay, Graham, thank you very much. We'll go to the news in a second, but first, please, this is from Don in Broadstairs. Please ask Kemi if she thinks it's acceptable to make a personal attack at the dispatch box. It's her job to oppose, not to personalise and be uncaring and own goal me things.
Oh, I don't think so. Actually, quite a lot of people have said thank you for saying what we had on our minds. Rachel Reeves was extremely personal in her budget speech towards the Conservatives. I mean, I can't count the number of times she used Liz Truss's name when Liz Truss is not in the chamber to defend herself. Labour are quite happy to be personal, and then when other people respond in kind, they start complaining about it. Politics is rough and tumble. You've got to give as good as you get. Rachel Reeves has spent a lot of time complaining about how people are treating her. She needs to start thinking about how she's treating the people of this country who are getting poorer.
But you did kind of have a little jab about her tearful episode, didn't you? Was that really?
No, I didn't. I didn't say anything about her tearful episode.
Oh, you merely said. You certainly implied.
I said something. I said she sat at the dispatch box as the realization dawned that her backbenchers were going to do to her what she was doing to our economy, and that's right. What we saw with this budget is Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer trying to bribe their backbenchers so they don't get rid of them. That is terrible. That's our money they're using to save their jobs. That's wrong.
Right. We'll come to more of your questions in a moment. If you'd like to ask Kemi a question, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC at 7:33. Let's get the latest news headlines from Tim Humphrey.
The Conservative leader has told LBC today's budget will see millions of people dragged into higher tax bands over the next 6 years. Kemi Badenoch has been responding to an announcement by Rachel Reeves that income tax thresholds will remain frozen until 2031.
People are going to feel poorer. The sum total of this budget is that households will be poorer because of it. That was in the OBR report. I think it says household income is going to go down.
The Chancellor also announced a so-called mansion tax on homes worth more than £2 million and a tax surcharge on income from savings, property and dividends. There will be a pay-by-mile levy on electric vehicles and the freeze on fuel duty will end next September. The two-child benefit cap will be scrapped in April, something Kemi Badenoch has told us she will overturn if the Conservatives come to power. LBC weather, rain moving east tonight. It will be heaviest in the northwest, a low of 8 degrees.
This is LBC. Listen on the move with the new LBC app. Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
7:35 on LBC. It's budget day today, as if you didn't know. Kemi Badenoch is here taking your calls. When did you find out that the whole budget had been leaked? Because you were presumably in Prime Minister's questions.
Well, it's been leaked slowly for the last 3 months.
Well, that's true.
There was very little that was a surprise. But the OBR analysis, which confirmed a few things, I certainly heard about 10 minutes before Prime Minister's question. So I asked the Prime Minister about it, but he didn't want to answer.
Because you could have actually delivered Rachel Reeves' budget for her, couldn't you?
But I could have, but I would never have. I would never deliver a budget like that. That was a Labour budget.
Do you think that heads should roll at the OBR? Deputy heads will roll.
That's what tends to happen. Well, I think we need to get to the bottom of what happened. I mean, these leaks are extraordinary, both from the Treasury and the OBR. You and I were talking in 1947, a Chancellor had to resign because they accidentally mentioned something on their way out about what was going to be in the budget, let alone these leaks. They're terrible, and they have an impact on the economy. They're really shocking.
And it was quite extraordinary, and I don't know how many people saw this, but the Deputy Speaker, Ghani, before Rachel Reeves stood up, really gave the government a complete dressing down, didn't she, about these leaks?
She did. And she was right to. Because the other thing that happens is that they diminish Parliament. Because what's supposed to happen is you vote for your MP. Your MP is one of the first people to hear the budget. They can respond in real time, speak on behalf of their constituents. But if they're sending it out there, then they're diminishing the arena where the government is meant to be questioned. And I think that's quite wrong.
Right, let's go to some more calls. Charlie is a new caller in Coventry. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. What would you like to ask?
So I suppose it's a bit of a unique question in a way, but I'm 21, I'm a care leaver, so I used to be in the care system when I was younger. I went through a lot of stuff that led to me having quite severe mental health conditions, which have led to me being on disability benefits, as you know, PIP and the Universal Credits Limited Capability for Work. And as a care leaver myself, we're already disadvantaged in society. We already have lower access to the labour market. We have difficulty accessing housing. A lot of care leavers end up homeless, in prison or dead before they're 25. I'm lucky myself. I managed to come home to family. I had people there, but a lot of people didn't. And it's very difficult for me to hear how you, Kemi Badenoch, would talk about how disability benefits are sort of misused in a way, or that people with ADHD are going around with Motability cards. It's quite actually hurtful to hear. And there is people out there who take the mick on all types of things, whether that be benefits or whether that be corporate tax breaks or whether that be the fraud that happened with the COVID loans. What I don't get is, why do you think it's acceptable in a way to demonise people such as myself? And we've done nothing. We aren't the ones draining the country, drying away. If you look at the pensions triple lock, that cost the government spending 135 billion a year, whereas personal independence payments cost about 22 billion, give or take. I think 22 to 25 billion. I think the wrong sort of areas are being looked at to cut.
So what's your question, Charlie?
My question is to Kemi is, why does she think it's acceptable to demonise people on disability benefits when we've done nothing wrong? We're not fleecing the country or doing anything wrong.
So I don't demonise people on disability benefits. We have been very clear that those people who need disability benefits should get them. But there are a lot of people who don't need disability benefits and health and sickness benefits who are claiming them because they know how to game the system. And this isn't research I've just made up. It has come out. You know, the DWP actually put examples of people getting luxury vehicles who shouldn't, someone getting Motability because of tennis elbow. And I do think that people with low-level conditions like ADHD, like anxiety, they should be in work. Work is actually good for people who have those conditions. What we are seeing right now is an explosion in the number of people claiming disability. Last year, health and sickness benefits, I should say. Last year, we had 2,000 new people each day going on health and sickness benefits. Each day. This year, it is 5,000. It cannot be the case.
What do you put that down to?
It's a lot of things, but we do believe that a lot of people have worked out how to game the system. It is a lot easier to talk about conditions that are hard to diagnose than the ones that are very easy, people who can't walk, people who can't see. Saying that you've got a condition that is mental health is much harder to diagnose, and a lot of people have worked out the right things to say and the right things to do. We don't have in-person assessments anymore. During COVID, we stopped those. They should have come back. We were planning to bring those in the election. To her credit, Rachel Reeves has said that they are going to start bringing that back in. I think that should see a fall. But it cannot be the case that 3,000 extra people on top of the 2,000 new people each day claiming benefits are all sick. Something is going wrong.
Charlie?
I think it would make sense what you're saying if that was actually backed up by proper hard evidence that you've seen yourself.
That's the government's own research.
Well, I live in quite a poor area. I have spoken to a lot of people who have attempted to get on PIP before because of their disability. It is an excruciatingly hard and degrading process. I've been through it before. I had to supply details of everything that I went through down to the bare bones to explain why I have the conditions I have. That's quite a degrading thing to put people through. And saying stuff about tightening up assessments through the Conservative government of 2010 to 2024 is what led to thousands of people dying following being found fit for work from the work capability assessments. These are people that are never going to come back. These are families that have lost their people because this rhetoric of tightening benefits is getting harsher. Not everyone is out there fleecing the system.
Of course not everyone is out there fleecing the system, but it is not possible that 5,000 new people each day should be claiming health and sickness benefits when just last year it was 2,000. Something is wrong, and the government is the one that released those figures. Okay. Something is wrong, and we've got to fix that.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Matthew, who is a new caller in Morpeth. Matthew, what would you like to ask?
Hi, Kemi. I'm a farmer from Northumberland. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for the support that you've given the industry since the budget last year. The question I've got, irrespective of the inheritance tax issues that we're facing, small and medium-sized businesses in the UK are being pressed massively due to cost pressure. The minimum wage increases obviously won't help that either. You know, I'm on a farm. It's me, my father, and we employ one person full time. Now that member of staff takes more out of our farming business than we do. I'm working at about half of minimum wage at the moment. What can the Conservative government do going forward if they get back in again to support small and medium-sized businesses going forward? Because there's immense cost pressure.
So, Matthew, I'm very sorry how things have got so difficult, but thank you for calling, because a lot of people don't understand that farmers do a job that a lot of people can't do for pay that is well below minimum wage, but because they own their businesses, nobody cares. One of the first things I said as soon as I became leader is that we're going to reverse the family farms tax. It is a bad tax, should never have been put in place by Rachel Reeves. The family business tax as well, we would reverse those. But I also think that the burden on farmers is too high. I am an MP for a rural constituency, and I had a farmer, I had a meeting with a farmer, and the number of things that he was dealing with: compulsory purchase of his land to put pylons through that would then reduce the value of the land. He was looking at the changes in inheritance tax that were going to affect his whole family. The costs of all his suppliers' costs had increased. The weather had been bad. He had a terrible harvest. It's just one thing after another. So we can't control the weather, but there are a lot of things that we can do. Reducing the red tape tax burden. Those are things that we can do. We can create a level playing field. I think that if we are importing things from other countries, we need to make sure that they are at the same standards that farmers in our country have to meet, because it costs you money to do that. I think we should make it easier to employ people. It's too expensive for you to employ a lot of people. Let's take down the burdens for farmers. We may not be able to fix the weather. We may not be able to fix the global price of grain or other things, but there are some things that government can stop doing to make your life harder.
Okay, Matthew, thank you very much indeed. We do have to go to a break because we've only got 15 more minutes, and then it's our budget special cross question at 8. And we have Dan Tomlinson, the Treasury Minister. We have Fraser Nelson from The Times, Dame Harriett Baldwin, Conservative frontbencher, and Paul Nowak, the General Secretary of the TUC. It's 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. A promise made.
No extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds.
A promise broken.
And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level.
Is it doom and gloom from the Chancellor with a string of tax rises hitting the pockets of working people? A budget to reassure the bond markets? Or a government committing foul play? Join me, Nick Ferrari, tomorrow morning from 7 as I speak live with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:48. Kemi Badenoch is here taking your questions. Here's one from from Kim. The council tax system hasn't changed since the 1990s. The Chancellor's using a sticking plaster for the moment, but isn't it time for a complete overhaul? Well, it's a bit like the pensions triple lock, isn't it? Sort of no politician wants to go there because they know that there'll be so many people that have to pay more.
Well, it's one of those things which perhaps should have been looked at, 30 years ago and just, continue to go up gradually. But a change now means a lot of people are suddenly hit with large amounts of money that they may not be able to afford. And I think that that's going to be quite a difficult message for a lot of elderly people who are living in long-standing homes to hear. They might not be able to afford their council tax, have to move out of a home they've always lived in. And selling the home will then be harder because people won't want to buy homes just above that threshold. Stamp duty is yet another thing. So I think that you do these difficult things when a country is growing. You do them when people are not feeling a cost of living crisis, and you can actually make it worse.
Because, of course, homes haven't been revalued since 1991. And it's ludicrous that a new house is built and the valuation office have to think, well, what would that have been worth, or the rent? What was the rentable value in 1991? It's ludicrous, isn't it?
Yeah, they end up matching it to similar homes in the area. It's not ideal, but when I hear about council tax increases, taxes on pensions, taxes on savings, income tax thresholds being frozen, which means more people being dragged into tax, taxes on cars, taxes on holidays, and you were just talking about tourism tax. After a while, I think people are just going to think, what on earth is going on?
Are you ever tempted to emulate George H.W. Bush and say, read my lips, no new taxes? Because that didn't work out well for him, though, did it?
Well, that's because he then did raise taxes.
Exactly.
And this is the thing. Breaking promises as a politician is death. This is one of the reasons why we ran into trouble, because we made promises and not raising income tax or not raising taxes being an example, and we had to do it because of COVID. People didn't forgive us, and Rachel Reeves has been breaking a lot of promises. She said she wasn't going to tax working people. She then said after she did the first time she wouldn't come back for more, and now she won't rule out even more tax rises. I think that's shocking.
Right, let's go to Max in Barnet. Hello, Max.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on. It's a real honour, actually. This is a brilliant conversation. First of all, I just want to say, Kemi, I hope you keep speaking so clearly. It's wonderfully refreshing.
Thank you.
You might be the most intelligent person in politics at the moment. So
that's a massive
really
compliment.
It's pretty low bar, though.
Don't diminish it. Thank you, Max. I'm going to take that one home.
You can be a great woman in your time.
Okay, enough of the flattery, Max. Get on with your question.
Well, the question is hard, right? So you keep reacting to everybody's policies, and you haven't yet set out your stall on any one of them. This feels like a great opportunity, for example, on tax, to say something at least, which is, over the long term, we want to move to, for example, what Tom Stoll would say, either no taxes or flat taxes, right? So no more special interest. This is our position. Or the cost of government is too high. Over the period, if you were to vote for us for 10 years, we would aim to do this, at least something, right?
I think that is a very fair question. We have started setting out our stall, and our stall is the government's got to live within its means. That's why we have this golden economic rule: find savings, pay down the deficit, and invest in tax cuts. I want to see a lower tax burden overall. I also want to see a lower burden on red tape. When I was business secretary, I could not believe just how many rules and regulations businesses were having to follow to the point where we were uncompetitive. I want to see energy costs come down. We have a cheap power plan, which is better than what Rachel Reeves said today. It will make a huge difference to the cost of living, bring down household bills. We think a lot of the policies around net zero are not working. They've just made life more expensive, but people's, we're not fixing climate change, and people are getting poorer. So the direction of travel is, as you describe, a lower tax burden, less red tape that is stifling business, being more competitive. But the reason why I have to react is not just because I'm the leader of the opposition. It's also because when I see these things coming out, I have to explain to people why they are a bad idea. People may disagree with the argument, but you cannot tax your way to growth. And I am very worried about how big the mess Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are going to leave us when they leave office. I do believe they're a one-term government. I do believe the Conservatives will come back. We made a lot of mistakes, don't get me wrong. I'm fixing that. We're under new leadership, and I'm working very hard to win back people's trust. But I do worry about how big the mess they're leaving will be. And that restricts the amount of promises that we can make, because we will have to tackle that mess first.
But do we not get into a cycle? So if you become Prime Minister after the next election, you can do exactly what Rachel and Keir have done and say, it's far worse than we thought.
No, well, you have to. This is when the character of the person.
You take my point.
I do take your point. This is when the character of the person comes into the fore. What kind of person do you have as leader? Do you have someone who just says whatever it is they think people want to hear? Yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. And then, those sorts of people, they can't deliver. It's why I don't make promises unless I have a clear plan to deliver them. And unlike others, I actually have a record in government. People can see what I did. There is a record to look at, making sure that we lifted regulation, talking about how, stopping more tax increases from coming in. There are things that I have done which I can stand by. And that's what I want people to trust.
Right. Max, thank you. Let's go to Brett in the fine city of Norwich. Hello, Brett.
Yes, good evening. I'm a taxi driver. I do the train 80,000 miles a year.
Oh, Brett, I'm sorry, I missed that. You're a taxi driver?
Brett,
did you say?
Brett, it's a terrible line. We're going to try and get you back on a better line because I can barely hear what you're saying. Let's go to Mick in Ilford first. Hello, Mick.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is, Labour have confirmed that they are going to proceed with including pensions, private pensions within somebody's estate from April 2027. So after years of being encouraged to pay into your pension, your beneficiaries, potentially when you pass away, are going to have a large inheritance tax to pay, and potentially you'll get double taxation, I understand, because when you could potentially get income a tax on the income that you take from that pension as well. So my question is whether, if the Conservatives come to power, whether you will reverse that.
Well, we're going to spend some time looking at what kind of things we can fix. After the last budget, we did come out with the things that we would reverse: the business, the family business taxes, the family farms taxes, VAT on private schools. We're reversing all of that. We've said that we will reverse what they've done with the two-child cap. I do think that you are right. It is not fair to have the same money taxed and taxed again, especially when you put it in with the expectation that it would be left alone. People need certainty. This was something that I said to Rachel Reeves, that you need to have a long-term plan. What kind of country do you want to be? And she doesn't know what kind of country she wants us to be. They came in and they were just dealing with, itches. They wanted to scratch, let's give the union some money. We'll do this thing. We'll put VAT on private schools. They didn't actually have an agenda. Most budgets should be about, we're going to do this on education. We're going to have, a big push on this, on infrastructure. We're going to do house building. We didn't have any of that. All we saw was little grabs of money in all sorts of places, including pensions like you talked about. So I would like to, is my answer, Mick. I would like to, but let's see what we can actually do. I don't know how bad the mess that she's made is. Hopefully this is something that we can fix, because pensions are something that people put together for when they cannot work, and that is why they're special. It's why we've said that we are maintaining the triple lock, but we also need to make sure that people have the right incentives to save. I don't want a country where people don't bother saving because they think there's no point and they'll just rely on the state pension. That is not right. You are doing the right thing and we need to back you.
OK, Mick, thank you very much. Now, Brett has gone, but his question was about the pay per mile tax. He's a cabbie who drives a hybrid and does 80,000 miles a year. Why should he be taxed more? That's what he wants to know. And of course, if you drive an electric car, you're going to be 3p a mile for electrics and 1.5 for a hybrid.
So I think Brett has a very, very good argument. I think that a lot of people got hybrids, got electric vehicles because they were assured that they were doing something right for the environment. Those cars are more expensive. They're not cheaper. They're more expensive. And we need to take that into account. I'm particularly worried about people who live in rural areas because they have to do a lot of driving, just like Brett, who is a taxi driver. He's going to have to put that charge on his customers, as will many others. It will then, decrease the number of hybrids and electric vehicles we have out there. It makes things more expensive. We cannot tax our way to growth. We are taxing everything, and it's just a punishment. We need to start looking at growth policies, reducing the right taxes, making sure we're on the right side of the Laffer curve, making sure that we're encouraging people to hire, to invest, to grow, to start a business here, rather than everyone looking to work for the government because it's the only guaranteed salary. That's terrible.
We now come to the bit of the programme that you always enjoy most, the quickfire.
Right.
Your best and worst budget policy from today.
Best and worst budget policy. So I think all of it was so bad. I don't even know where to start. I mean, what Mick was talking about on pensions, really bad. I think, to be honest, I think freezing the thresholds is the worst thing because she promised not to do that. She said so at the last budget, and now she's done it. I think what she's done on in-person assessments, if she follows through, will be a good thing. I don't know whether she will follow through because Rachel Reeves says a lot of things that don't actually happen.
Who are you gunning for in the war between Trump and the BBC?
I hope President Trump does not sue the BBC, but BBC needs to do a lot better.
Is it fair to dig up Farage's comments from decades ago?
I think that if the people who heard those comments think that he would be a problem in government, then they should be looked at. I'm not somebody who believes that people should look at historical things from so long ago, but when you have just that level, and this is a lot of people, it's not one or two people. I think we've got about 20 people saying some very, very strong things, then I do think that should be looked into. And I think that there's a big difference between somebody who's working as a receptionist and they dig up their comments versus somebody who wants to be Prime Minister. I've had people dig up comments that I've made years ago, and I've stood by them.
See, I'm trying to find that hour-long programme you did on 18 Doughty Street in 2006. Do you remember that? Well, the internet TV station. That's where I first met you. I mean, imagine if we found that tape somewhere.
I'm very proud of myself, I'm sure. And look how far I've come.
Exactly. Now, briefing seems to be out of control in number 10. Have you ever briefed against a colleague?
Never.
But you do get people briefing against you, don't you?
Yes, they shouldn't. But I think that people who brief don't actually understand that we all pay a price. It reduces trust in politics. I mean, I've had colleagues do things that I've been very upset by, but I know that briefing against them, anonymously in particular, is actually harmful for all of us. I tell people, when people have done something I don't like, I tell it to their face. I don't hide it and go to the papers.
Where in the UK would you pay a big tourist tax to visit?
Where in the UK? Well, my children have recently taken up surfing, so probably Devon. I would pay. I would not want a tourist tax in Essex. Essex is fine. It's the way it is. We live there. We don't want any hassle. So
I was in Frinton doing a speech on Friday night. They certainly wouldn't want a tourist tax. Do you ever use AI?
Yes, I do. It's now my search engine. I don't use Google anymore, which Google were very upset by when they heard me say that. I just asked the question because it means I rarely have to do second and third questions.
You can't totally trust ChatGPT.
No, you can't. You can't. But in the same way that when I search things, I looked into it. It's the same with AI. Microsoft Copilot comes with our system, so. Now, hopefully it's more trustworthy.
If people aren't watching, they're not going to know what I'm doing when I ask this question. But do you know what this means?
Yes, I do. I have 3 children. One is 6. So, and all the labels on her clothes are 6 to 7. Yeah, and so she does 6, 7 all the time. And the 9-year-old loves it too. I do. I think it's hilarious. Although I think they're getting bored with it now. I think they got bored with it about a month ago.
Do you want to do it just for the camera?
Oh, they
That's the bit that's going viral.
Yeah, they also explained the right tempo. So when we do it like this, it's too slow. You've got to put some body work into it.
Kemi, thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Hope to have you back. Actually, we should have you back before Christmas, shouldn't we? Because we're doing one a month. So we'll have a special Christmas call, Kemi, in full Santa regalia, maybe, or possibly not.
It, but
right,
I'll think of something.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, let's. We've got Cross Question coming up in a moment, but first let's get the news at 8:02.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she recognises she's asking ordinary people to pay more after setting out £26 billion of tax increases in her budget. They include freezing income tax thresholds, new levies on electric cars, and limits on how much salary you can put into a pension tax-free. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch told LBC she doesn't accept the Chancellor's claim that tax rises are down to the Tory party's record in office.
They put taxes on all the people who don't vote for them. Farmers, people who send their kids to private school, businesses, but those are the people who create growth. And all of a sudden, jobs are disappearing. This problem is of her own making. She had a job-destroying budget, growth has flatlined, and now she's had to come back for more.
At least 36 people are dead and hundreds missing after several Hong Kong apartment blocks went up in flames. The fires spread across bamboo scaffolding. A man's admitted driving into crowds at Liverpool's Premier League victory parade in May. 54-year-old Paul Doyle from Croxteth changed his pleas a day after a jury was sworn in for his trial. And the Pope's embarking on his first foreign trip, a pilgrimage to Turkey and Lebanon. It marks the 1,700th anniversary of the Orthodox Church in Turkey. In the city, the FTSE 100s closed up 82 points at 96.92. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.14. LBC weather, rain moving east tonight but remaining heaviest in the northwest, a low of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Always take your doctor's advice. Search NHS antibiotics.
You saw me, walking along the beach. You watched me turn round the headland, and the tide, it cut me off. The rocks were wet, too wet to climb, so I panicked. But you didn't. You dialed 999 and asked for the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
And I just want to say, whoever you are, thank you.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard.
I'm a real snack monster. But Mum and Dad says all that munching isn't good for me. Around half the sugar we eat comes from unhealthy snacks and sugary drinks. If you want to change from a snack monster to a snack star, search Change for Life for loads of healthy snacking ideas.
I've looked after my kids since they were born. Now they've got kids. I still want to look after them. I don't want them struggling to make decisions about my money or my health if I can't. So we made a lasting power of attorney. Now, if I can't speak for myself, they'll speak for me. It's a weight off for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, Mum. Lasting power of attorney. Search your voice, your decision.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8:06. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. It's a budget special. I imagine most of the questions will be about the budget, but that's really up to you, isn't it? Because you set the agenda. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask our panel a question, either by phone or on WhatsApp. You can text 84850. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel.
0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let me introduce our panel tonight. We have with us to my left Dame Harriett Baldwin, Shadow Business Minister and Conservative MP for West Worcestershire. Next to her, Paul Nowak, General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress. To my right, Dan Tomlinson, the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury and Labour MP for Chipping Barnet. And next to him, Fraser Nelson, columnist for The Times, ex-editor of The Spectator. Right, welcome to you all. Let's get going with our first question, which is not ready, I see. So
Seamless.
Apparently I've got to scroll up, says Corey. So because we were a little bit late finishing with Corey, I'm all asunder. Right, Steve in Christchurch. How can we reduce the number of people claiming benefits? Exchequer Secretary.
Good to be with you this evening. In a studio that I hadn't been in before. It's very nice and new. Nice, smells very nice and clean. Very good. Look, your question is a really important one. The welfare system that this government inherited, in my view, was a failing welfare system. Not only did it leave lots of children in families where they were too poor to be able to afford to eat, and we might talk about the two-child benefit change
I'm
later.
sure there'll be a question on that.
But it also left lots of adults too sick to be able to work and trapped in a system that didn't give them the support they needed. That if they received certain benefits, the DWP effectively said, "Okay, bye-bye. We're not going to talk to you again now. We're not going to engage with you. We're not going to try and give you the support that you need to try and move towards work." And also, many of the interviews that took place weren't face-to-face. So we are starting to make some of those changes, more of the interviews being face-to-face now. We have changed the incapacity benefit within universal credit, and that reform, the OBR has said today that will support more people into work. But I'm the first person to say that there's more that this government needs to do to keep reforming welfare, to keep making sure we can support people back into work. Because in the end, that is a really important route out of poverty, to have that stable, good job. We've increased the minimum wage today, so people who are on lower incomes will get 50p more an hour. That adds up to hundreds of extra pounds over the year. But we do have to do more, and there is more that the government is doing, and I can talk you through the different reviews that we've got underway, the different steps that I hope we will take in the coming months and years, but that's sort of my starting position when it's on.
Kemi Badenoch in the last hour was vaguely supportive of what you're doing about introducing in-person interviews again. I think that they stopped that during COVID.
Ironically, I think it was Mel Stride who's now saying that he's the best in the business at bringing down the welfare bill. We saw the welfare bill surge and stop the in-person interviews.
But also, she said that there are thousands of people every day coming into the benefit system to claim various different kinds of benefit or universal credit. And she said there are people gaming the system. How can you stop that happening, assuming you think it is happening?
Well, if you look at the rate of increase in ill health in the population, that's gone up half as slowly as the rate of increase in personal independence payment claims, which suggests that we do need to make sure that we can put a lid on the increase in the amount of people flowing into these benefits. Look, of course, personal independence payments and disability and incapacity benefit payments have to be there for people who need them. Of course, that's the right thing. But at the same time, we do have to make sure that people receiving benefits are not locked into a part of the system where the government just stops engaging with them, doesn't help support them into work. And we've got to make sure, particularly on young people, that we're not leaving them adrift. And that's why what the Chancellor was saying today, and she talks about this at party conference too, the youth guarantee. So after 18 months, we're going to make sure that people are moving into work. And if they're not, then they won't be able to keep receiving their benefits. I think that's the right thing to do after 18 months of engagement and support. 1 in 8 young people now are not in education, employment or training. And there's loads that we can do working with the trade union movement to help increase apprenticeships, make sure we've got more people having good jobs and well-paid jobs. But we've also got to make sure our welfare system is encouraging and supporting people to get towards work.
Fraser Nelson.
I would be a lot more encouraged by that if it wasn't for the OBR's projections. I mean, one of the great things about budgets now is, of course, we hear the politicians' words, we hear their intentions, but then the OBR will give us their projections. What's going to happen to welfare, the caseload? What's going to happen to the spending? We find out that the welfare bill is going up something like 73 billion to 406 billion by the end of the decade. Now, when you look at the numbers, with 3.5 million on incapacity benefit right now, sickness benefit, going up to 4.1 million, 500,000 more by the end of this Parliament. The vast increase that's been budgeted for the caseload, for the money, for all of the displacement is such that the OBR says that this government is not getting the number of people benefits down. It's increasing them significantly, hugely, even more than the Conservatives did. Now, I agree that the Labour inherited a very bad hand from the Tories. They didn't get a control of this at all. But as far as the OBR is able to work out, nothing, absolutely nothing, that the Labour government has said or done is going to decrease the huge acceleration in people on out-of-work benefits. Now, that's bad for them, it's bad for the communities, it's bad for the economy, and it's bad for the taxpayer.
Just on one more point, and I don't want to be too picky because you make a good contribution, Fraser, but the OBR did, I think, and I have only skimmed read their report today, but I think they did say that the changes that we made last year have helped in terms of supporting more people into work. But I totally get that there's more that we've got to do.
Right, but you also accept it points to a massive upward trajectory. The OBR have said, yes, that welfare spending is coming in higher. That's why we have to keep working to bringing it down, because the system before wasn't working at all, and we have got to change it for the better, and we will.
Just on the OBR, do you think Deputy Head should roll?
I'm not going to comment on that. Obviously, what happened was totally unacceptable for the budget to be accidentally published. I was in the chamber at the time, wasn't quite sure what happened. I understand it was accidentally published on their website. I'm sure lots of your listeners will understand this, but the OBR is totally separate and independent from government. This wasn't a decision by the Treasury or a mistake in the independent organisation. They verify our forecast. They're meant to publish their verification of the forecast after the Chancellor. Of course she was. I was sitting behind her in the chamber when she got passed a message to say what happened, and I could see she was really very furious about it.
Okay, have you seen that look before on her face?
No.
Harriett Baldwin.
On Steve's question in terms of welfare spending, I mean, obviously there are two things that have got to happen. First of all, you've got to make sure that being in work is something that is more rewarding than not being in work. And I'm keen to hear from the government minister this evening what he thinks he can actually get through his backbenchers in terms of reforms, because there clearly have been some challenges there. I think I want to just also correct the record that the face-to-face was dropped during the pandemic, and Mel Stride was not welfare minister at the time, but he was planning to bring this reform in. It's something that I wholeheartedly support. But the second thing that needs to change as far as welfare is concerned is you've got to make sure that employers have that opportunity to create the jobs, and it's not too expensive to take someone on. And I am very concerned that the measures that were put in place in last year's budget have made it considerably more expensive to take on an employee. We've seen that businesses have reacted to that by dropping payroll jobs by 180,000 so far, and there wasn't anything in the budget today that made that something that a business could take a chance on. In fact, there are quite a few things coming through in the employment rights bill that Paul is endorsing that I think will make it actually a less appealing thing for a business to take on an extra employee. So those are the two things that I think I'd like to see the government do more on.
Paul? Yeah, well, how do we get people off the benefits bill? First thing is get their wages rising. Because there's this misnomer that people who claim benefits are all out of work. In fact, 6 in 10 of the families that will benefit from that scrapping of the 2-child limit will be people who are working. Who've got workers in their family. So getting wages rising, and the employment rights bill is actually a crucial part of that, because it's about getting people into well-paid, secure employment, giving them confidence, and that in turn boosts confidence in the economy. Second thing is improving the support that people get going into work. I know the government set aside £1 billion. I went round with the former DWP Secretary Liz Kendall to a job centre to talk to the staff and to the people who are in the job centre, and no one believes a 10-minute interview every couple of weeks is enough to get people, sometimes who've got chronic issues and problems, back into work. So you've got to improve the support there. And the third thing I do is, and again, we saw a positive announcement in terms of government support for smaller employers today, removing the training costs for apprenticeships, the youth jobs guarantee. It's in everybody's interest to make sure we don't have 1 million young people not in work, education or training. Can I just set a note of caution about the OBR, Iain? I mean, it was clearly a massive cock-up today, but I think we need a much broader root and branch review of the role of the OBR. They tend to score budgets. They take a 5-year assessment of the impact of things like investment in whether it's education, training, new nuclear. You can't score investments like that over just a 5-year period. And it's 15 years since the OBR was set up. I think it's time for a proper look at whether or not the OBR is helping. And there are other things. I mean, in the run-up to this budget, publishing those productivity forecasts when they did, aided or sort of put us on this roller coaster of speculation. So I think a proper root and branch, not a knee-jerk, proper root and branch review of the OBR to make sure it's fit for purpose and is doing the job it's designed to do.
They do a once-a-year report on the longer-term, medium-term financial outlook, which I can recommend to you.
But Harriett, the reality is a programme like Sure Start that lifted millions of people, young people out of poverty under the last Labour government would never have passed muster under the OBR.
Is there not a case, Dan Tomlinson, for abolishing it altogether and bringing it back into the Treasury?
No. There were lots of things that George Osborne did.
There
are lots of things that George Osborne did that I don't agree with. But I do agree with having the economic forecasts independently drawn up by officials who aren't inside the Treasury. The officials in the Treasury, may I say, are wonderful, and I've been really well supported by them in my job. I've only been in this job since the 1st of September, but I do think it's right that the economic forecasts are set independently by people who aren't inside the Treasury.
We haven't spoken on the programme since your promotion in September, which we think we played a part in by having you on the programme so often that sort of your colleagues in the Whip's office saw your talent.
Oh, well, thank you then. I appreciate it.
I think we're on to the next Chancellor.
Right, we're going to take some more questions in just a few moments' time. It's 18 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
20 past 8. Apologies to JQ and anyone else who's very disappointed that Diane Abbott isn't on the programme as advertised. She will be on the programme, but at 9 o'clock. So she'll be giving us her views on the budget after 9, as well as Aggie Chambray will be here for the whole hour. We'll be taking your calls, getting your reaction to the budget. Right, let me reintroduce my panel. Dan Tomlinson is the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. What does that mean? What bit of the Treasury do you have control over?
The T word. Tax.
Oh, okay. That must be a really interesting job. Fraser Nelson is a columnist for The Times. Dame Harriett Baldwin, Shadow Business Minister and Conservative MP for West Worcestershire. And Paul Nowak is the General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress. Ben in Sutton is on the line. Ben, hello. What would you like to ask?
Hi. Thank you for the call and good evening, panel. My simple question is this. In the last budget,
Oh, Ben, it's a terrible, terrible line. I'm just going to read your question because we can barely make out what you're saying. How would the panel suggest growth can be created since it's all anyone speaks about? Paul Nowak.
Well, I think the government has made a start. I mean, we've now got a coherent industrial strategy, and I think that's a really, really important element of growth. Resetting our trading relationships with our closest trading partner, most important trading partner, is also important, and I think we did see progress there with that EU summit in May and the memorandum of understanding that came through that. Having a coherent approach to infrastructure projects in this country. I mean, we've got an appalling track record, whether it's HS2 right the way through. So the government has set out now a 10-year infrastructure pipeline, and what we need to make sure is, as we're building new nuclear and hundreds of thousands of new homes and upgrading our grid, we're not falling short of necessary skills, and we've got the right workforce in place to deliver on those projects. And then crucially, it is about making sure that ordinary working people have got money in their pockets. And the reality is, since 2008, real wages have gone up by £12 a week. I mean, the average worker would literally be hundreds of pounds better off if we had any sort of normal wage growth in the economy. And that makes a big difference, Ian, because our members, when they get pay rises, they don't squirrel it away in offshore accounts. They spend it in the local shops, or they buy a new car, or they book a holiday, or they take the kids to the seaside. And so giving ordinary working people the confidence that they can go out and spend a few bob and that they can build a decent life, I think is essential.
What about the minimum wage announcement yesterday, which I imagine a lot of your members will think, oh, this is fantastic because we will have more money in our pocket. But there is a point, though, I would suggest, that if the minimum wage, particularly for younger people, goes up too much, that will have maybe a counterintuitive effect. And it may be, and I had some people phone in last night saying this, that smaller, medium-sized companies will just think, well, we can't afford this in the way that we will have to legally, so therefore we can't employ so many people.
But you're absolutely right. There is a balance, Ian, and that's why we've got the Low Pay Commission, which is made up of employers and unions and independent experts. And for the last 25 years, their job has been having decent raises to the minimum wage and making sure it doesn't have a negative impact on employment. And I think they've done that job well over the last 25 years.
But do you agree with the concept that 18-year-olds should be paid the same as people over the age of 21?
I absolutely do, because I think people should be paid the rate for the job. Now, if somebody's in an apprenticeship, there are defined apprenticeship rates, and absolutely you are training, you are learning your craft, you're learning your trade. It's right that the pay goes up in increments. In our large supermarkets, for example, I can tell you they've got rid of age-related rates, because if you're doing job X, you should get that rate of pay whether you're 18, 19, 20, 21 or 25. Okay. So I think this is, and frankly, I don't believe, because this is going to be phasing out of those youth rates over time, I don't believe that employers are going to make that decision on employment or not between paying someone £10 or £10.80. And the reality is, when their birthday comes around, they're going to have to pay them a high rate of pay anyway. So I'd encourage people to think about what decent employers already do, and most of them don't have those age-related rates.
Harriett, Baldwin.
Well, I think ultimately growth is created by people taking a risk, creating a business, making an investment, taking on additional workers. There's a role, obviously, for government in terms of providing infrastructure that enables that growth. But ultimately, I think the horse that pulls the cart is the private sector and the job-creating sector. And you've got to have an attractive environment for inward investment into this country as well. I'm concerned, I heard today that the Treasury aren't even looking into the stories that we're hearing about so many people leaving the country and so many millionaires fleeing the higher tax rates in the UK. We've had the lowest year on record for foreign direct investment into the UK. And so I think we need to think about how we make the UK the best place to come in, invest, create a business, take on workers, give them the good jobs that Paul wants. And I'm concerned that we're not seeing that. We're seeing the opposite of that. Yeah.
Just before I come to our other two panellists, some breaking news. 2 members of the US National Guard are being shot not far from the White House. Police say they have a suspect in custody. We'll hear from Simon Marks later in the programme and get more on this. Fraser Nelson, let's remind ourselves of the question. How would the panel suggest growth can be created, since it's all anyone speaks about?
Well, this was Keir Starmer's great promise to us last year in the election, that he would kickstart growth, that was his phrase. And I think, Dan, if I'm right, your aim is to have the highest growth in the G7 consistently over 5 years. Now, again, let's look at the OBR's projections. They project the lowest growth, pretty much, in the G7 over these 5 years. We had hoped employment to be 80%. That's the goal, isn't it, I think? Mm-hmm. And the OBR is saying that's absolutely not going to happen. There's going to be no increase at all in the employment rate. Now, again, that's the other great thing about the OBR documents. They explain that things are pretty hard in companies. The return on capital is going down. And when companies are taxed, when employers are taxed with the national insurance increase, then this feeds through in wages, it feeds through in the number of people that can grow, and basically high taxes make everybody poorer. That's the bottom line. And we're about to have the highest taxes ever attempted in the modern history of this country. Now, that's how you don't get growth. So we've now got a government machine which has grown. I think the government is now spending, even after adjusting for inflation, the government's spending twice as much as it did when Tony Blair was elected. So you've got a government machine doubled in size, grown out of all proportion to its usefulness. The country's being taxed, and the burden of tax is crushing the growth out. You need to reverse that process to get growth.
There are. I take the point. There are lots of countries with lower tax take as a share of GDP than the UK that might be richer, but there are also lots of countries that have a higher tax take as a share of GDP and are richer. I actually don't think that the big thing. Well, the big thing is the design of your tax system. Does it work well? Does it support growth? Does it support investment? Rather than the precise level as a share of GDP. And in this budget, what we're trying to do is to make sure we can support the people who want to grow our economy. So we haven't changed the rate of corporation tax. We've got the lowest rate in the G7. The last government put it up and down, up and down, up and down. We've kept that at 25%. And also we've got a really exciting package of measures I've been working on in the last few weeks in the Treasury to support the entrepreneurial community and tech startups, with doubling the amount that they can get to support to bring in the people that they want to bring in, this enterprise management scheme, and also doubling the investment limits for the schemes that invest in the startups and help them to grow. And that is so important, because that's where the lifeblood of new jobs and new employment comes from, is when we can get these startups turning into scale-ups and then hopefully staying in the country. And Iain, just quickly on the overall question from the caller, in my view, the big challenge that we've got in this country in terms of economic growth is that investment has been too low for too long. So I think in 24 of the last 30 years, the UK has had the lowest rate of investment of any country in the G7. That's public and private sector investment. And the heart of this government's growth strategy is getting that investment up. So we've increased public sector investment by £120 billion over the course of the Parliament. That means we can invest in things like new nuclear power, for example, at Sizewell C, £16 billion on new Northern Powerhouse Rail, those sort of public sector investments. But at the same time, we're reforming the planning system and supporting the private sector to grow and invest more. So I think, we're being really pro the expansion of Heathrow, changing the planning rules so we can get more houses built. That is so crucial. Public and private investment together. That's the route to higher growth. That's the route to higher wages and higher productivity for our country.
The OBR has scored all this, and it completely doesn't agree with you. It thinks the growth is going to be worse than it was when you inherited. It's actually lower than it was under Rishi Sunak. If you look at what you inherited, the economy is going to be smaller now than what it was set to be when you came into power, because none of what you've mentioned is actually growing the economy.
The last year, when we changed the planning rules, the OBR did score them. They said it would make the economy $7 billion bigger, bring in extra tax revenue, and that was the biggest change that they've done to their forecast for the economy of any
0.2%.
It's the biggest change they've ever done of any non-spending measure. The Tories had 14 years of having a chance to try and change something about the way our economy worked. That the OBR would score,
do you accept
and they actually scored this, and it's the biggest thing they've ever scored.
Do you accept, Dan, that house building has been lower this year than it was previously?
We definitely need to get house building.
Well, let's not pretend as well, though, that the OBR always gets its forecasts right. I mean, the Chancellor came to the dispatch box today. The OBR forecast growth at 1%. Yeah. Pretty meagre. It was actually 1.5%. Still too modest, still not enough. But that forecast clearly wasn't right. And I go back to the role of the OBR. I do think that there needs to be a proper root and branch review of the role of the OBR, because you should be helping this process rather than hindering it.
Congratulations to Dan Tomlinson, who's the first government minister to be on the programme to have lasted 30 minutes before he said 14 years of Tory failure. Well done, Dan.
There we go. Thank you.
I've got a question for you when we come back on the loan charge review, which was mentioned by Rachel Reeves in the budget, and we'll come on to more questions from you as well. It's 8:30. Let's get the news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
The Chancellor says she recognises she's asking ordinary people to pay more after setting out £26 billion of tax hikes in her budget. They include freezing income tax thresholds, new levies on electric car drivers, and limits on how much of your salary you can put into a pension tax-free. Well, the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch told LBC she's so upset at how much pain is being inflicted on households across the country following the budget. She's called it a smorgasbord of misery to pay for welfare, as a two-child benefit cap will be scrapped in April. And a suspect's been arrested after 2 members of the US military were shot in Washington, D.C. Police say it happened 1 block from the White House. The condition of the National Guard members is currently not known. LBC weather: rain moving east tonight but remaining heaviest in the northwest, a low of 8 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:33, we have Dan Tomlinson, the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, Labour MP for Chipping Barnet, Dame Harriett Baldwin, Shadow Business Minister and Conservative MP for West Worcestershire, Paul Nowak, General Secretary of the Trade Union Congress, and Fraser Nelson, columnist for The Times. Before we go to our next question, Dan, tell us what is in the conclusions of this loan charge review, because a lot of listeners to this programme have been following this over the years, really ever since Mel Stride, when he was, I think, in your position in the Treasury. I confronted him on the programme, which he was none too pleased about at the time. But you've now inherited this responsibility.
Yeah, so the loan charge, I'm sure lots of your listeners know about it, but there might be some who aren't. So there's these schemes called disguised remuneration schemes, where people pay fees to promoters, but they were actually not paying the tax that they were meant to be paying. And there's lots of people, tens of thousands of people, who were involved in these schemes, and then the previous government said, we're going to apply this thing called the loan charge to you, and we want to get that money back. Now, I and the Treasury and this government still think that is right for people who owe tax to make sure that they pay the tax. I think taxpayers across the country who are, paying their share through pay-as-you-earn or whatever would think that. But at the same time, I recognise, and this government recognises, and we said it in opposition, that the loan charge was a sort of very exceptional piece of legislation, and in lots of ways it didn't work, and it wasn't right, and it wasn't
people
fair.
Were being pursued for back taxes going back 20 years.
Back a long way.
That's what I think the big objection was. 6 years fine, or was it 7 years as the norm? And not 20.
And there were all these changes. There were all these quite distinct things about the loan charge. That meant that people did have quite large liabilities. So what Ray McCann's done, and my predecessor in the role, commissioned this independent person to do a review of the loan charge and to figure out how can we get to a place where people who do owe tax can come forward and settle. And Ray's recommendations, and I'm happy to come back on your programme and talk in more detail about this, are really wide-ranging. And they're also sort of expensive, as it were. So 350 million, I think, is the cost over the next 5 years that the OBR have scored sort of less revenue that we'll get in because of these changes. But I think, and I hope, that will mean that people can come forward because they'll see, I think, the average reduction in the loan charge liability is around 50%. And I've gone further than Ray's suggestions, his recommendations, and we're taking an additional £5,000 sort of flat off of everybody beyond the changes that he's put forward. I really hope that people who have been affected by the loan charge, and it was, under the previous government that we were in this sort of really difficult situation, will now look at the proposals that Ray's put forward that we've made fairer as a government. And we'll come forward and we'll settle, because I don't want this. And I wrote the forwards to the government response to Ray's review, as I say in there. And I've met loan charge campaigners. I've got constituents who've been affected by it too as a constituency MP. I want this to start being part of people's past rather than just hanging over them in their future.
Yeah, because there have been.
I really hope that people can come
think I'm right in saying around 15 to 20 people who have taken their own lives because of the pressure that they've felt under because of this. So and a lot of people have actually gone bankrupt. So maybe we'll have you back in the future to talk about this.
If I can ask one question, what about those who did settle under pressure? And they settled for far more money than they now have to pay. You've made these changes, but I'm wondering if somebody basically did settle, I don't know, like 3 months ago or last year or something, will they be given relief under the scheme?
No, this is really difficult, but we were set the terms of reference for Ray McCann's review, and he's come back and he's reviewing the people who haven't yet reached an agreement with HMRC. It is difficult, but I don't think it's right to reopen cases that have been settled.
Okay. Right, let's move on. Andrew is in Maidenhead. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
My question is, a manifesto is about getting a mandate about what you will do. And given that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were so clear about no tax surprises, nothing in the manifesto beyond what was laid out, and so on, in fact, going so far as to call, I think, suggest that Rishi Sunak was lying in the election debates when he said there would be tax rises. Does the government have a mandate for the huge new taxes and spending splurges that it's embarked on in this direction of travel, since the optics and the substance of this debate are nothing like what it laid out in its manifesto?
Okay. Harriett Baldwin.
I think it was something like 50 times, Andrew, during the general election campaign that both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister said that beyond what was set out in the manifesto, they had no plans to raise taxes. Beyond that, no plans to review council tax. That was also a specific question they were asked. And no plans to increase taxes on working people. And I think every economist that we've had in front of us on the Treasury Select Committee has said that the increase in terms of national insurance paid by employers ends up being a tax on working people, because obviously it affects the number of jobs that in the economy, and also pay increases. And I think that today the further announcement, again following a lot of assurances that last year's budget was a one-off and that there wouldn't be any further taxes on working people, I think you can see very, very clearly that by freezing the thresholds at which people start paying tax and at which you start paying higher rates of tax, that is very much a tax on working people that's been extended now all the way out to 2031. And it's something that the Chancellor herself said she would not do when she came to last year's budget. So I think people do feel that they were told. I can't say it in the chamber, but I think Andrew used the word, lies about the government's tax plans, and they've been very disappointed by what has happened.
So you would agree with Andrew? They don't have a mandate for what they've done.
They've got a majority, but I think that in order to get that majority, they said things to the British people which have been contradicted by their actions, and I think that undermines trust in democracies.
Paul Nowak.
Well, I just want to pick up one point that Harriett made about council tax, because I don't think the government did make a commitment around council tax actually as a manifesto commitment.
I'll send you the quotes.
Last year. But honestly, Harriett, I don't think anybody, I would hope most people listening to this are not going to make the case that those who've got properties worth more than £2 million or indeed £5 million shouldn't be asked to pay a little bit more tax. I think that's right and it's fair, and it's about asking those with the broader shoulders to pay a fairer share. I'd say manifesto commitments are important, and they're important in terms of the public retaining trust in politicians. That's why we talked about the Employment Rights Bill before. That was a manifesto commitment to deliver that package in full at the last election. It's something that's supported by voters across the political spectrum. It doesn't matter whether you voted Tory, Lib Dem, Reform or Labour at the last election. There is overwhelming support for the Employment Rights Bill, and that's why Lib Dem and Conservative peers should stop blocking that legislation in the House of Lords, get it onto the books, and that will be about giving people a little bit of dignity and security at work.
Dan?
There were lots of commitments that we made in our manifesto, and this government is doing the right things and sticking by them. So we said we wouldn't put up income tax, national insurance or VAT on working people, and we haven't done so. Those rates, when I stood for election, the rates were 20, 40 and 45, and they will still be 20,
the thresholds up, which
40
puts up the income tax on working people.
But we were really clear it was about rates in the manifesto. That was the commitment.
Really?
Yeah, I've got it here. We will not increase the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. I can go through it again. On the threshold freezers, it is worth just being really clear here. The whole thing that we've been trying to do in this budget is to minimise the impact on people, employees and self-employed, 30 or so million people up and down the country in work. And that's why we've made all of those other reforms. Paul was talking about the high-value council tax surcharge. There's other changes, these reliefs that were spiralling out of control. There was one that the Tories said would cost 100 million. It's now costing 2 billion. We've brought that back into line. It's why we've changed the Motability scheme. Under the Tories, you could get a tax-free sort of luxury, very nice car using your disability benefits. We've changed that now. That's saving 300 million. We have made a whole range of changes on tax so we can minimise the ask from employees. And yes, we have said at the end of the decade, after 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it is of freezers that were implemented by the previous government, we are going to continue those freezers to the thresholds. But we do need to ask everyone to contribute because, we talk about what's changed. I did not know when I was knocking on doors in Chipping Barnet, which I know you know a bit well, having had a history there, Iain. I did not know then, and I don't think anyone knew, that the OBR, the independent forecaster, would come along and say, not because of any decision this government has made, and they put this in black and white today in their report, that they're downgrading the long-run productivity growth in this country and that would cost £16 billion in terms of future tax revenue. I didn't know that, nor did the Chancellor. And what are the options if you're presented with that from the OBR? Option 1, you could rubbish and trash the OBR. Liz Truss tried that and look what happened. Option 2, you could sort of massively increase borrowing, whereas we've got borrowing coming down every year over the next few years, which is bringing down interest rates for everyday families. We've had 5 cuts in interest rates since the election. Or you can do what the Conservatives did in 2010 and turn to austerity and slash investment spending, slash investment in our public services, and we are not choosing that either.
Fraser.
I think Labour are choosing austerity. It comes in two ways. One is spending cuts, the other is tax increases. And that is going to filter down. We can see it in the terrible pace of living standards. We've seen today that the average household disposable income is going to grow by just 0.5% over the next few years. That's half what it was supposed to do before. So it will feel very much like austerity to those who will, at the end of this Parliament, be on less. The average worker will be on less than they were pre-crash 2008. That's like I'm not excavating with Tories here.
No.
I'm just saying that austerity takes money forward, and a massive tax burden also imposes its own form of austerity. Okay. But to get to the question as to whether it's got a mandate, of course it does. This government's got a majority. It can do absolutely anything it chooses to do that it can get past its backbenchers. I believe that governments should govern. And I think it's really daft when politicians promise not to raise taxes before elections, because, of course, you say you didn't know the OBR is going to uprate productivity. I get that. But did you think it was possible? Of course it was. All sorts of things can happen. And George Bush did this, John Major did this. They always regret making promises that they can't keep. Nick Clegg promised he wouldn't put tuition fees, and look at that. So I think that governments should go there basically asking people to trust them on character and do what they need to do to govern, and then at the end stand for re-election. Voters can keep them in, chuck them out, but meanwhile they should be able to take whatever measures they think necessary to govern. And Keir Starmer, the best thing he's got is a massive majority and many more years in the bank. So I don't think he's got any excuse, as it were. I like to see strong, decisive election results. I like to see empowered prime ministers able to do what they think is best for the country. They shouldn't really be hemmed in by silly little promises that you made during the campaign, and then you stand for the voters' verdict at the end of the Parliament.
Can I just say on living standards, we've got to beat those forecasts. We've got to do better by everyday people up and down this country, and we're taking steps to do that. Next April, I don't think it's been mentioned yet on this programme, next April, we're going to scrap one of these levies that was put on bills that wasn't working in any way, shape or form. It was meant to help people who were fuel poor, but 97% of people in fuel poverty ended up spending more on it than they got back. It wasn't working. We're scrapping that from April. That's going to take £150 off every household's energy bills. And that's the sort of thing that we can do, get more money into the economy, support people so they're not having to dole out money on high energy bills, but they can spend it in their local shops, in their communities. I think that's a good thing that we've announced today.
Right. More questions in just a moment. But first, it's 8:46.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:49 on LBC. I'm going to tell the panel what the fun question is, because I'm going to tell you what it is, and I want your answers on the text 84850, and I'll read one or two of the best ones out. Which product would you abolish all taxes on? A food, a drink, a car, whatever you like. And of course, Dan will have to answer in a personal capacity, because it wouldn't obviously be government policy.
It's a tricky one for the tax minister.
Indeed,
Thank you,
Kevin. Right, we have with us Dan Tomlinson, who's a Treasury Minister, Dame Harriett Baldwin, Conservative MP, Paul Nowak from the TUC, and Fraser Nelson, columnist for The Times. How have you adjusted to being a columnist for The Times as opposed to being an editor?
It's funny because about a third of my brain is still an editor's brain, and it's still whirring more. And I go into
Should the Times editor be worried?
Well, no, but I'm trying to normalise myself. It takes a while. I guess it's like being an ex-minister or something. You get so used to seeing the world in a certain way. No, but it's fun. The Times is a fantastic, very liberal place to work.
And do you often look at the New Spectator with Michael Gove as editor and go, not sure I'd have done that? Or
I used to look at my own Spectators and think, I wish I hadn't done that. But when I look at the New Spectator as it is, I love it so much. It's so much more enjoyable reading something you didn't have to make.
With no responsibility. Yeah. Right, a text question from Jim. This is a good one. We just heard Kemi Badenoch won't do it. Rachel Reeves clearly won't do it. Ed Davey won't do it. Nigel Farage might do it. Is it time to scrap the triple lock? Fraser.
I have yet to meet a single politician in private who will not tell you that it's trying to stop it, no matter what party they are. Everybody agrees it's a complete attempt to bribe the pensioners. Every time you think, it's not going to cost very much, and then you find out inflation goes up more than you expect, and you end up vastly distorting the tax system. And really, crushing yourself, not being able to help the working age people, and you've now got something like 1 in 4 pensioners is in a millionaire household. So everybody knows it needs to go, but everybody thinks that you can't win an election if you cross it. So we're in this strange loop where all the politicians are saying in public what they all don't believe in private, that yes, this is defensible. But what we need to think is for either all of them to get together and say, okay, you know what, we're all going to drop it, so we're not going to use it against each other in campaigns, because we simply can't afford this anymore as a country.
Harriett, now just pretend we're having a private tete-a-tete here.
I would be telling you, I think it's been a really successful policy. It's lifted a lot of pensioners out of poverty. I'm concerned that with the freeze in the income tax threshold, you're going to have a lot of people who rely exclusively on the pension who are going to be caught up by HMRC, and I'd be very keen to hear from Dan how he thinks that HMRC are going to be able to cope with that. And it's been a very, very successful policy which has lifted lots of pensioners out of poverty.
Paul?
No, but I think we do have to ask ourselves, why has it become such a sort of totemic political issue? And partly it's because we've got so many people who are reliant on the state pension because they haven't got decent occupational pension provision. So one thing the government is doing is a review of pensions at the moment, building on the Pensions Commission, and we need to get people saving more for their retirement. We need to get employers making more in terms of pensions contributions. And frankly, I think if pensioners are well off, then they should pay a fair share of tax. But no, I wouldn't suggest it publicly or privately. And that's because the TUC has got Congress policy and I'm a Democrat.
Right, well, OK. Dan, government policy is?
Is it time to scrap the triple lock? No.
You can stop there if you want.
Yeah, I'll just stop there.
OK.
But how are you going to cope with all of the pensioners who are going to have to suddenly start paying a small amount of tax?
Well, this year, the personal allowance threshold is higher.
But it's not by the end of the budget period.
This year it is.
Not this tax
You're just
year.
ignoring it, the
this
problem.
Tax year it is.
And the next tax year?
Let's see.
Well, you're presumably going to have to come up with a proposal. You can't charge people like £5, can you?
Not going to be imposed with
We have a whole other budget to come before then.
Who was it? Was it the Tories who started this? They're the ones to blame. I mean, when one party starts, all the rest think they can't stop. When you look at now the gap between the average worker's income and the average pensioner's income, that gap is really narrowed over time. And it's just, it is so vastly, horribly unfair. When you look at how
there's one thing that's really interesting today in the chamber. I was sitting in there. Sir Edward Lee, stood up, I think, Father of the House, and said that he wants the triple lock scrapped. And it was interesting. I won't name them, but there were a whole bunch of Tory MPs nodding along in the chamber. And I just thought that was interesting that the Conservative Party is sort of being up for saying that publicly. I don't think we should scrap it.
But Fraser made an interesting point there about the gap between pensioner income and workers' income, but it does reinforce that point about what's happened to wages. We've been in a weird period over the last 15 years that real wages just haven't risen the way that they should, and we need to get real wages rising again.
I completely agree there, and you need to take money away from the pension system and back towards giving relief to workers, to taxpayers, even to companies who can afford to pay people more. Because right now we're becoming a gerontocracy. This is the government looks like a scam, basically, where the young do all the earning and the government pays the older people because they tend to vote a lot more than the young. And it just needs to be broken by somebody at some point. I wish the winter fuel payments were being abolished as Rachel Reeves wanted in the first place.
Just going back to the story that we covered a little earlier, the West Virginia Governor, Patrick Morrisey, has confirmed that both members of the West Virginia National Guard shot in Washington, D.C. have in fact died. So we'll have more on that in the next hour with Simon Marks. Now, a text question from Julie. I think this is the shortest one we've ever had. Is council tax fit for purpose? Paul?
Well, I think the government made some much-needed reforms.
If you all answer this really briefly, we can
I think they made some much-needed reforms today. I think probably it needs a wider reform because when was the last time that we those valuations are based on? Is it 1992? 1991. So probably time for a wider reform. But I think actually what they've done today is a sort of that's politically it's the right thing to do.
Harriett?
Well, I think I worry a lot about the fact that council tax is set to go up by 5% every year during this Parliament. And I think that is becoming a really difficult bill for a lot of working households and a lot of pensioner households to pay. And so I would rather see a system whereby the cost of social care was explicitly funded in a different way, whereas it's getting piled and piled and piled into council tax. And I know the government has got a piece of work, but it seems like it's going to take several years to come up with something that I wish we had sorted in government with the Dilnot recommendations.
Okay. Dan?
Could I ask Harriet a question here, and then I will answer? But just I think this would be an interesting thing. So my view is that it's not fair that someone living in a £10 million house just around the corner from here pays less tax than pretty much anyone in a typical house in any other local authority in England. So that's why we're making these changes today. And I'm interested what the Conservative Party's view is on that. Do they think that that's fair or not?
I think it is a sign that you have very, very long and stale valuations in terms of properties baked into the system, and that there is a very credible economic case to change the system. But I think in order to do that, you would need to get an electoral mandate to do it, because I think it is such an enormous and it's such a significant bill for so many households. It's such an enormous thing that you would be looking at doing that you would really need a proper mandate to go about doing that.
Do you consider Bandef properties mansions? I live in a Bandef property and I can assure you it's not a mansion.
No. And let's be really clear about what the policy is that we're putting forward today. We're saying that if your house is worth more than 2 million, less than 1% of all the homes in the country, so not more than 2 million, not was it worth that in 1991, but is it worth that today? I think the evaluations will happen next year.
Who's going to do them out of interest?
Then we will ask. We will ask you to pay more.
Who's going to do them? Because the valuation agency, I do a lot of casework with them, and they seem pretty backed up in terms of their work already. So, do you know who's going to do that work?
It will be the valuation office, which has now come in house to HMRC, and we will make sure they've got the resource that they need to do that. I'm sure that's all detailed in the budget document. Well, I'm actually, as government minister, very interested in whether or not this targeted look at the houses worth more than 2 million, whether we can use some powerful private sector data to try and make it cheaper, the admin costs of introducing this. But this is just the top 1% of homes.
But the point is surely that it's only going to raise 400 million, which in terms of public expenditure is not an awful lot, given the cost of valuations and all the rest of it. I mean, is it worth the candle?
It's going to cost many, 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 many multiples less than 400 million to do the valuations. It is just less, I think, than the top 1% of properties. Is it worth the candle to make sure that we don't have a property tax system in this country where someone living in a £10 million property, somewhere near here, pays less council tax than someone living in a typical terraced house in pretty much every council area in the country? I think that's the right thing to do. I think that's the sort of thing that people would expect from a Labour government.
If you really had the courage, you would have the whole country revalued, wouldn't you? But you won't do that because it would be politically impossible.
We wanted to iron out what I think is the biggest injustice in the council tax system, and I'm interested to see what all the other parties end up saying about that, because I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the fair thing to do. I think the charges are, setting 0.01% of the property values, and I hope that we can have a good debate about this in the House of Commons.
I think this has been done not really to raise revenue, as you say, Ian, but it's political signalling, snarling at the rich. Same with the private school fees, hardly raised anything. Where the extra teachers were promised, not coming. But this is sort of political mood music. So Dan here can talk about people in £10 million houses, and we can talk about people with broad shoulders, etc. So right now, you can get taxes that are raised for revenue and taxes that are raised to signal your political priorities. I think this comes into the latter category, and it's a political tax, and I'm not sure how much good it's going to do. And by the way, I don't think council tax is fit for purpose, but the last person who seriously tried to reform that was Margaret Thatcher with the poll tax. It didn't end well.
But you can both have something that sends a political signal and also raises much needed revenue. And again, I think the OBR
significant revenue. 400 million is not significant.
I think the OBR actually said that the VAT and private school fees generated more income than they originally did.
But my point is, remember what we originally promised, we're going to get extra teachers.
Well, I'm going to have to draw this to a conclusion because we have to have time for the last question from Kevin. Which product would you abolish all taxes on? A food, a drink, a car, or what? The winner from the text, it's not particularly brilliant actually, but it's good. Fish and chips. Paul?
It's been a long day, so I'd say beer bought in a pub, which would encourage footfall in hostelries.
That's getting a lot of approval from the gallery, particularly. Oh, yeah.
In the gallery.
But my actual sensible suggestion...
Clapping their hands, they're whooping.
They'll all be joining a union now.
Absolutely. I've got forms in my bag. But my sensible suggestion is we don't charge VAT on books, and I don't think we should charge VAT on musical instruments.
Totally
musical
agree.
Instruments, let's get ukuleles and guitars into the hands of kids and save me a few bob at the same time.
Showing your age there. Harriett?
I like the idea of scrapping stamp duty on buying a home, and
which
we've got a fully funded policy to do it. Yeah.
Dan?
You're going to wince a bit of this one, but I'm really happy that in the budget we have abolished bingo duty, and I'm trying to convince the Treasury to let me go to a bingo hall and have fish and have chips and beans, which is what I tend to have when I go and play bingo. I do love it.
And you want to be a bingo
chips and beans, Dan.
Chips and beans.
Dan, you're the minister. Just go.
So,
just go.
Either I'm going to get to go on a visit and go and talk to people who go and play bingo, or I'm just going to go. I'm just going to go on my own.
Just go.
I just want to hear you say two fat ladies.
I'm not going to say two fat.
Fraser?
I think it's time to liberate Scotch whisky. I mean, so much of that is tax, and it's getting really expensive now. You want a single malt is like £60. That's too much money, and most of that goes to, I'm afraid to say, Rachel Reeves.
For a bottle, not a single.
No, for a bottle, right?
Yeah.
But my more serious thing would be charity donation. I think that should be completely tax deductible, and that would make there's some amazing charities in this country, and I think anybody who donates to them should be able to claim complete tax relief against it, not just 20%, everything, and that I think would do a lot of good.
Okay, well, it's been a brilliant cross question. Thank you all very much indeed for your contributions. We'll have another one, but next Monday. Now, we are going to continue talking about the budget in the next hour. It's going to be your opportunity to phone in with your views about any aspect of what Rachel Reeves announced today. We're also going to be talking to Diane Abbott, getting her reaction as well. And Aggie Chambray will be with me for the whole hour. She wants it to be called Ask Aggie, but I'm going to have to resist that, I'm afraid. But if you do have questions for us on the budget, you can obviously ring in on 0345 6060 973. Is this the budget to turn the Labour Party's fortunes round? Is it the budget that will save Rachel Reeves' job and possibly also Keir Starmer's? That's something to get your teeth into as well here on LBC.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, 2 National Guard members shot near the White House earlier today have died, according to the West Virginia state governor. A suspect has been arrested. Police say the White House has been put into lockdown. Donald Trump is in Florida for Thanksgiving holiday. LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks has more.
The shootings happened close to an underground station that is so near to the White House that the Secret Service responded to the gunfire. The motive for the shooting is unknown, but the presence of National Guard troops on the streets here, ordered by President Trump in August, has